Chapter 8:17. He's still my third cave master after all. I've already promised so many night roamers to him. Why, just leave him here and continue serving me. I believe there will be a day when the blood oath is removed and he can regain his freedom. Having resolved the most fundamental conflict, Li Qingshan's attitude eased up and he smiled. Everything else can be discussed today, but I have to take this bitch away. Yi Weiyang said. Li Qingshan glanced at Ghost Shadow curiously. He had no idea how he had offended the Shadow Queen so deeply. I'm afraid I can't comply with that. If I can't even protect a subordinate, what's the point of being the king of savages? Ghost Shadow cast a grateful gaze at Li Qingshan. From a certain perspective, his objective was the same as Yiliosu's. They both underwent the third heavenly tribulation before returning to the Shadow Palace. Yi Weiyang gradually raised an eyebrow. Her sinister killing intent began to permeate the surroundings. Li Qingshan turned to his side and looked back at her. His smile remained the same, but he showed no intentions of backing down. The atmosphere that had just eased up immediately tensed up again. It made the banyan tree king sigh inside. Ghost Shadow's existence was not particularly important to them, yet they just had to fall into a stalemate for the sake of their pride. Shadow Queen, can you listen to me on this? Yiliosu interrupted before shooting a glance at Li Qingshan. If they stayed together any longer, they would definitely start arguing again. Alright, I'll listen to what you have to say first before I take this bitch away, said Yi Weiyang. A crescent moon silently sank into the western mountains. The first rays of dawn surged in the east. Ghost Shadow followed closely behind Li Qingshan nervously, but in the end, the Shadow Queen did not appear again. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief and settle down. Yiliosu sat under the great banyan tree. The seat before her was empty. Yi Weiyang had already left Savage Mountain silently. She was still in thought, remaining silent for a very long time. There was a flash before her, and Li Qingshan sat down in front of her. He smiled. How was it? Did you have a pleasant conversation? Yiliosu nodded slightly and suddenly put on a charming smile. Thank you. Li Qingshan stood up and looked to the east. The road ahead is still long. In the myriad poison cult, several hundred fire basins of varying heights burned with gloomy, green flames, dyeing the hall a wretched green. The myriad poison ancestor sat on his throne and felt rather uneasy, so he stood up and paced around the hall. He thought, have I miscalculated something? When the Shadow Empress makes a move, even I don't dare to be negligent, let alone a mere second heavenly tribulation brat. There's only death awaiting him. At this moment, the flames moved without any wind, rising and flickering. The myriad poison ancestor's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly looked back, only to see that an additional item had appeared on the throne. It was the treasure of the myriad poison cult that he had offered as a reward. His expression changed, and he actually gave up on the assassination. Why? Why? He waved his arms and shouted loudly. His wide sleeves fluttered in the wind as a faint green flame ignited. However, there was no answer. Only his voice constantly echoed through the hall. Never did he imagine that the Banyan Tree King would support a human for free, helping him control formations and mediate disputes. However, with the assistance of the Banyan Tree King, Li Qingshan was instead even more at ease in the Mist Province than in the Green Province. Before long, the news of this battle spread across the south very quickly, even reaching the entire Mist Province. The Myriad Poison Cult was a very renowned large sect in the Mist Province, yet they had actually been destroyed by the King of Savages, Li Qingshan, in a single battle. Even the Myriad Poison Ancestor was helpless against him. Everyone found this unbelievable. After hearing Qian Liangmu's report, the King of Southern Yu also became surprised. He held the chess piece between his fingers and forgot to place it down. He said to the Banyan Tree King on the other side of the chessboard, "Sure enough, there's a reason why you've taken a liking to this kid, fellow. It does make my killing intent grow heavier." Let's just focus on harmony. The Banyan Tree King smiled. The King of Southern You raised an eyebrow, and the surprise in his eyes deepened. The Banyan Tree King's attitude was even clearer than last time. Last time, he said he was forming a good relationship with him, not exactly protecting him, but now, his intention of protecting him was very strong. It was very worth considering. It had to be mentioned that when the Banyan Tree King agreed to control Savage Mountain's formations and went to great lengths to mediate between him and the Shadow Queen, he was no longer absolutely neutral. Even with his wisdom, it was impossible for him to not have any likes and dislikes, as well as distance between people. When others looked at Li Qingshan, they only treated him as a genius disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, but in his eyes, he was a supreme prodigy that only appeared once every 1,000 or even 10,000 years among demons, and he had a fortuitous encounter with him. The King of Southern Youth said in amusement, "No wonder this Li Qingshan is bold enough to come to the south and become the next commander. As long as you give the order, who's bold enough to touch a hair on him? Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by the heavens." The Banyan Tree King expressed his attitude. If the King of Southern You really did make up his mind to eliminate Li Qingshan, he would not forcefully stop him. This was what he had to bear when he referred to him as fellow. Aren't people of my generation supposed to defy the heavens and change fate? The King of Southern You asked. The Banyan Tree King only smiled. He did not answer. Li Qingshan, are you bold enough to come out and fight me? Above Savage Mountain, the myriad poison ancestor rode on a poisonous cloud. His voice boomed like thunder, making no effort to hide the raging fury in his heart. Myriad poison, you old coot, how dare you act so recklessly on Savage Mountain? Aren't you afraid I'll wipe out your myriad poison cult? Li Qingshan stood on the top of the mountain and laughed aloud. Whether you're bold or not, you only need to say the word. The myriad poison ancestor said. What if I say I'm not bold enough? Li Qingshan said leisurely. Then you can drop the title of King of Savages, because you're not worthy. The myriad poison ancestor said. Someone vaguely told me that too. Hee, whether I'm worthy or not isn't something an old coot like you can decide. If you want me to come out, then I just won't come out, Li Qingshan said. Alright. If you're so capable, don't come out for the rest of your life. I'd like to see just how long you can hide for. The myriad poison ancestor pointed at Savage Mountain and said in exasperation. He had truly been angered this time. He was even willing to use such a stupid method to teach Li Qingshan a lesson. You can stay here for as long as you want. I can't be happier cultivating in my dwelling. Li Qingshan said. The myriad poison ancestor snorted coldly and sat on the cloud. He had made up his mind to go head-to-head with Li Qingshan. If he stays outside Savage Mountain the entire time, the cave masters we let out won't be able to report back, Little N said. Just let them stay outside for a little longer. I'll piss off this old coot first. I obviously won't be hiding the entire time and competing with him in terms of patience. I just happen to want to use him for some practice. Li Qingshan rubbed his hands and said eagerly. Although the lifespans of cultivators were much longer than mortals, their concept of time was not as distinct as mortals either. The higher their cultivation, the more this was the case. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The myriad poison ancestor had no intentions of leaving. He seemed to be submerged in cultivation, but he had always been paying attention to Savage Mountain below. As soon as Li Qingshan left the formation, he definitely would not be able to escape his senses. Chapter 8:18. However, Li Qingshan was different. He had achieved success as a young man, earning the name of the Wild King in his 30s. Now that he had been sealed up, how could his mind not be affected? He would definitely become restless, which would affect his cultivation. And, if he could not hold himself back anymore and dared to come out and fight him, that would be even better. He was confident he only needed a single move to claim his life. The myriad poison ancestor had a plan, so he was in no hurry. He sat on the cloud firmly, like a mountain that weighed down on the sky above Savage Mountain. On this day, clouds stretched for thousands of kilometers, pitch black like ink, weighing down heavily. Thunder rumbled as drizzle drifted with the wind. A storm was about to arrive. Li Qingshan stood on the top of the mountain and raised his head. He could not see the myriad poison ancestor, but he could clearly sense that he was still there. It's about time. During this month, he had spent the entire time cultivating in the Azura field, focusing on the demon suppression statuary. He allowed the viciousness of the tiger demon to surge before converting it into the power of the demon heart, gradually diluting the spiritual qi in the ocean pearl. His demonic qi became purer and purer, vaguely yearning for a battle. I'll watch over you. Little End stood beside Li Qingshan. His clear eyes scanned through the clouds. Li Qingshan planned to temper the tiger demon's fighting spirit in this battle. The chances of him killing the myriad poison ancestor were extremely slim, so there was no need for Little End to take action and expose his trump cards. However, since Little End was watching over him, he obviously had to wait for that tiny chance to appear. With a clang, Li Qingshan immediately demonified. His body was covered in armor, and his appearance underwent many minute changes. He became a little more blood-red, and he became even more vicious. With a boom, the rock beneath Li Qingshan's feet collapsed, scattering in all directions. He had already burst out of the clouds, appearing 5 kilometers away. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly opened his eyes, and green light flashed through them. He was pleasantly surprised, but it immediately turned vicious. You really are still young, unable to keep your composure. Allow me to personally crush a genius like you. He stood up resolutely. His green robes ruffled in the fierce wind. His 2 skinny hands danced within his wide sleeves, and the rolling poison gas condensed into a ball of poison wrapped in lightning. Thunder pearl of myriad poisons. Li Qingshan was flying through the clouds, avoiding a purple snake-like thunderbolt. Far and near, the sound of thunder could be heard everywhere. Suddenly, danger loomed over them. A green light descended from the sky, penetrating through the dark clouds, growing brighter and brighter. Boom! A huge hole was blasted open in the thick layer of clouds. Layers upon layers of clouds spread out like the tide. However, the sun still couldn't be seen. The sky was filled with even thicker green clouds. Under the green clouds, the pitch-black demon's suppressing tower was in tatters, on the verge of collapse. Li Qingshan summoned the Devil Suppression Pagoda at the critical moment and blocked the attack head-on. As expected of a third heavenly tribulation great cultivator. You're quite powerful. The single eye on his forehead lit up, and a streak of light shot out. Through the green cloud, he saw the myriad poison ancestor sitting on the jade throne. The throne wriggled slightly like jelly. The monsters engraved on it seemed to come alive, opening their mouths together and spitting out thousands of lightning pearls of myriad poison endlessly. They all rained down. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips curled, and he flew up against the wind. With a rattle, 100 chains of demon suppression extended, ripping through the air and lashing out like whips. Boom! 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 The lightning pearls of myriad poison all exploded, and the sky became a terrifying region of lightning. The shockwaves swept across 50 kilometers. Li Qingshan suddenly rushed out of the lightning region. His armor was covered in scars from the lightning strikes, but it forcefully blocked them all. He dove into the green cloud again. Even with the protection of the demon qi, his ears were immediately filled with the sizzling sound of the poison corroding away. Some of the edges and corners were directly ground away, as if they would be completely corroded away if he remained in the poisonous cloud for just a moment longer. Li Qingshan was fearless. The myriad poison ancestor was right in front of him. He swung his right hand backwards, and the demon dragon sword appeared in his hand. Kill! The sword was like a dragon, directly aimed at the myriad poison ancestor's forehead. However, the myriad poison ancestor smiled viciously. A green membrane rose up from the jade throne like a soap bubble, blocking the demon dragon sword. Li Qingshan silently clenched his left hand into a fist. This fatal strike filled with awe-inspiring sword intent was only a probe. As long as he threw the punch at the myriad poison ancestor's old face, he still had a chance. In that moment, Little N's figure vaguely appeared above the poisonous cloud. Her seaweed-like hair drifted, but her clear eyes had already become an almost transparent white flame. The Buddha-slaying sword was in her hand too. But suddenly, a sense of danger rose up in her heart. Before she knew it, the myriad poison ancestor had held a green, poisonous tumor in his hand, nurturing it silently for quite some time. It was the protective treasure of the myriad poison cult. It shot out with a streak of pale green light. Li Qingshan blocked it with his sword, but he did not feel any resistance at all. However, the demon dragon's sword produced a sorrowful cry. The green light dyed the edge of the sword and passed through the hilt, dyeing his right hand. Immediately, the armor on his right hand shattered, and his right arm went numb, spreading towards his body inch by inch. With a clang, the demon dragon's sword shattered, dispersing into thousands of pieces. Li Qingshan could clearly sense that if it were not for the fact that he practiced the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, which made his body as tough as a demon king's, he would have been smashed to pieces. Die! Seeing how Li Qingshan was actually unscathed, the myriad poison ancestor was taken aback. He leapt to his feet and swung his hand, throwing a palm strike towards Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. Wasn't this exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for? Cold light flashed through his eyes, and a wisp of fire-like hair emerged from behind the armor. He let out a deafening moo, and the figure of the ox demon appeared behind him, heading towards the myriad poison ancestor. He had thrown a punch. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly felt uneasy, but he was unable to figure out what had gone wrong. With Li Qingshan's cultivation, he had a 30% chance of surviving if he fled, but clashing head-on with him was clearly courting death. It was already too late for him to change his move now. The fist and palm collided. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Li Qingshan's fist rapidly corroded, revealing the bones in the blink of an eye. Its flickering metallic luster dimmed from the corrosion as well. However, as the poison flowed, he smiled. However, the myriad poison ancestor was in disbelief. His skinny arm rapidly twisted and deformed, exploding into a mist of blood with a bang like a piece of wood that had been snapped. He was a great cultivator of the 3rd heavenly tribulation, but he was not particularly powerful. Against Li Qingshan, who could rival corpse kings, how could he withstand the great strength of a demon king, let alone the unstoppable power of tremors? Li Qingshan played him viciously from the front, causing him to fall heavily into the jade throne. Li Qingshan's scarlet eyes clearly reflected the myriad poison ancestor's shocked expression, as well as a ghostly figure. He stepped on the green bubble conjured by the jade throne, sinking in deeply. He raised his arms high into the air and crossed his fists, throwing them down with a roar. Even a mountain would be smashed to pieces. Boom! The green clouds dispersed, revealing the azure sky. The green bubble twisted and surged violently. Against Li Qingshan's powerful strike, it actually did not shatter and even showed signs of recovering. Its defense was as tough as it could get. It was basically undefeatable. The myriad poison ancestor raised his head and gazed at Li Qingshan. His armor had all been corroded away, revealing his sturdy body. He had a devilishly handsome face, and his unbridled, insolent smile revealed his sharp fangs. The pair of ox horns on his head were like crescent moons, about to pierce the sky. Just, who is this kid? The myriad poison ancestor considered retreating. A sword protruded from his chest, and the Buddha-slaying sword pierced the green bubble, passing through the back of the jade throne and his back. Behind the green jade throne, there was a white skeleton surrounded by rolling flames. With her here, he would never be alone. Why, you? The myriad poison ancestor widened his eyes, which were completely bloodshot. The Buddha-slaying sword definitely was not just tough and sharp. It was currently destroying his mind, igniting his flesh and blood, and devouring his soul. Li Qingshan did not waste any more words. He planted his feet on the left and right armrests of the jade throne and grabbed the myriad poison ancestor's head, throwing another punch. Little and swung the Buddha-slaying sword, and the samadhi flames of white bone surged out, enveloping the myriad poison ancestor. His white bone claws reached towards the back of the myriad poison ancestor's head. The green, poisonous tumor in the myriad poison ancestor's hand suddenly swelled, beating like a heart. With each beat, it would expand to 10 times its original size, revealing green veins and vessels. The myriad poison ancestor produced an inhuman roar, "Die! Retreat!" Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. He forcefully pulled back his fist, and his phoenix wings flapped violently as he retreated in a hurry. Little and pulled back his sword and turned around, but he was already a step too late. The green, poisonous tumor turned into a green sun. Thousands of rays of miserable green light shot out, eclipsing the white sun above and swallowing them. The green light landed on a mountain peak in the distance. The mountain peak collapsed silently, landing in the dense forest below. Whether it was the trees or rocks, they were all reduced to dust, immediately forming a pit of white sand. The light dispersed. Most of Li Qingshan's flesh and blood had vanished, as if invisible insects had gnawed away at it, revealing his craggy bones. They no longer shone with a metallic luster, becoming extremely fragile. Little N's white bones had also been dyed with a rust-like color. He arrived beside Li Qingshan. "Are you all right?" "I won't die." "That old bastard ran away," Li Qingshan said. As they spoke, Little N used the samadhi flames of white bone to suppress the spreading rust. Li Qingshan also used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to suppress the poison that had infected him. Even though they had grasped the opportunity, killing a third heavenly tribulation great cultivator was not that easy. The brief delay was enough for the myriad poison ancestor to flee back to the myriad poison cult. The formations of the myriad poison cult were on Savage Mountain, and the myriad poison ancestor personally presided over them. Although he was not as powerful as the Banyan Tree King, he could still unleash enough power. Even if the two of them were unscathed, they would struggle to break through. "We've used all of our trump cards this time, but he still managed to escape. It'll probably be troublesome from now on. The hunting dogs have already been mobilized. They might be able to keep him busy for a while," said Little N. "The hunting dogs?" "Oh." Li Qingshan suddenly understood. He smiled. "You sure are thorough." The Azura commander Yin Qing flew off, constantly flickering in and out of existence. She followed the streak of green light closely, searching for an opportunity and ready to strike at any time. When Li Qingshan fought, Little N had given her the mission. She had been observing the battle from the mountain peak the entire time. When the myriad poison ancestor detonated the cult treasure and fled Savage Mountain, she immediately set off. She only had a single mission, to keep the myriad poison ancestor busy. Chapter 819. Thousands of kilometers away, the myriad poison ancestor flew through the air. His face still twitched. Apart from his anger and humiliation, he was mostly filled with lingering fear. He had almost failed miserably on this trip to Savage Mountain. After blowing up the cancer, he wanted to use this opportunity to kill the two of them, but in the end, his cautious side still won him the upper hand. In other words, he could no longer ignore the sense of danger in his heart. He felt like ensuring his own safety was more important, so he flew towards the myriad poison cult without even looking back. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Looking back, he saw a blood shadow tailing behind him, constantly flickering and growing closer and closer. He bellowed, "Don't you dare, you scoundrel!" That bellow demonstrated his tremendous bearing as a great cultivator, enough to split a river with his shout. He did not weaken at all. If regular cultivators heard it, they would definitely shudder in fear. Those with slightly weaker cultivations might even develop inner demons from fright, or even their souls might disperse. However, the corner of Yin Qing's lips curled up. A defeated general was nothing to brag about. She had still overestimated this old man by comparing him to an Azura king. She had gone through bloody battles of life and death in the Azura realm, so how could she be frightened by a disturbance like that? Instead, it only made him even more cowardly on the inside. With a wave of her hand, the circular blades spun out, directly piercing through space and arriving before the myriad poison ancestor. The myriad poison ancestor sent the circular blade flying with a furious palm strike, but he could not help but falter. Yin Qing suddenly appeared above his head, and like a blade, she plunged her fingers towards the top of his head. Just now, Li Qingshan had grabbed the myriad poison ancestor's head and beaten it to death. He had already viewed it as the greatest humiliation of his life, so how could he let his head be touched again? With a flick of his sleeve, poisonous gas surged out and forced Yin Qing back. A withered hand was hidden inside, ready to strike like a venomous snake. Suddenly, it discovered an opening and reached towards Yin Qing's neck like a loosed arrow. Yin Qing vanished, hiding in space before shifting several dozen meters away, making the myriad poison ancestor's fatal strike miss. However, her body had been eaten away by the poisonous gas. There were some places where the flesh beneath her skin was directly exposed. She had gone from an enchanting beauty to an extremely hideous one. She did not care at all, and instead calmed down. This old man's poison is indeed fierce, but it's not fatal to me. This way, I can drag it out. With the Azura's immortal body, even Li Qingshan wouldn't dare to say that he could kill her with a single punch. The myriad poison ancestor sensed an ill omen. At the same time, on Savage Mountain, Li Qingshan gulped down the sap he had obtained from the Banyan Tree King. At the same time, he used the moonlight reflection to draw out the spiritual energy from the water god seal in the Cloud Dream Marsh to slowly recover his demon chi. His flesh grew back strand by strand. On the other hand, Little and brandished the Blood Sea banner. A blood dragon flew out and coiled around him, cleansing his white skeleton, diluting the poison before using the samadhi flames of white bone to cleanse it. If regular cultivators were poisoned by the myriad poison ancestor, they would be in huge trouble. If they could not find the antidote, they might have to contend with the poison for the rest of their lives, and they would probably be doomed in the end. As a result, even great cultivators with cultivations no lower than his had to be extremely cautious when they clashed with him. Unless they had no other choice, they would never want to become enemies with him. This was the reason why the myriad poison ancestor could dominate the south. However, Li Qingshan and Little and practiced a wondrous technique that far surpassed this world, which allowed them to forge extremely tough bodies. They were not afraid of being poisoned to death. However, the poison was extremely stubborn and violent, so they could only suppress it for now. Completely purging it would still take a very long time. Li Qingshan did not wait for his wounds to recover completely. He had just recovered some strength when many parts of his body were still jagged. Suddenly, he unfurled his phoenix wings and wrapped a hand around Little and fierce winds surged and flames raged, constantly accumulating power. Right when he was about to set off, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Looking back, he saw Ru Xian waving at him from the top of the mountain. "Have a safe journey. Remember to write back." "Fuck you." Li Qingshan scolded in a joking manner. He suddenly unleashed his power, leaving behind 2 long streaks of light behind him. He had already whistled through the air, pursuing the myriad poison ancestor. "Bitch, you're an Azura. Why did you listen to Li Qingshan and infiltrate the myriad poison cult to kill people? Wasn't it you?" The myriad poison ancestor barked. He had clashed with Yin Qing several times, so he could not help but sigh in amazement at the ingenuity of her teleportation. However, it made him remember something. Just who was responsible for the massacre of the myriad poison cult? Originally, he thought it was Ghost Shadow, but let alone whether he possessed the ability to pass through formations or not. Even if he did, he would only be able to kill regular disciples at most. Protectors and elders would never be killed so easily. He suddenly found the answer to the question that had been plaguing him the entire time. This woman, this Azura, has that kind of strength. Do you like the view on the square? And those words on the screen wall? They're pretty, aren't they? I've written them very diligently. After all, it's been so many years since I last wrote one. Yin Qing smiled. Her figure flickered in and out of existence. Although she had been avoiding an open clash with the myriad poison ancestor the entire time, her situation was not optimistic either. Half of her right arm had been eaten away, and due to the effects of the poison, it was unable to recover. Her other injuries were even more numerous. In order to keep the myriad poison ancestor busy, she had paid quite the price. But even with that being the case, her sharpness did not diminish at all. This was the battle heart of an Azura that she had forged through the years. It really is you. The myriad poison ancestor flew into a rage. Li Qingshan had wiped out the entire myriad poison cult, and it was all because something had happened in the cult. He had been drawn back to the myriad poison ancestor. Now that he saw the culprit behind all of this, how could he not grit his teeth in hatred? He regretted underestimating Li Qingshan once again. Originally, he thought he was just a junior, but never did he expect him to possess such strength, where he could even order around an Azura commander. If it's me, what are you going to do? Yin Qing did not seem to care at all, but she appeared several hundred meters away in a flash, pulling away from the myriad poison ancestor slightly. She thought, who knows what other killer moves this old man has yet to unleash. I better be careful and not give him an opportunity, or my life really will be in danger. The myriad poison ancestor said sinisterly, you want to keep me busy so that Li Qingshan can hurry over, but little do you know that he's been poisoned by me. He's already struggling to protect himself right now, so how can he still care about you? I must kill you today. With that, he suddenly raised his hands high into the air. Myriad poison burial. However, he coughed up a mouthful of blood first. This was a secret technique of the myriad poison cult. Even when his body was unaffected, he would still have to endure some pressure, let alone when he was heavily injured right now. He would be harming himself before harming the enemy. However, for the sake of revenge, he could not care so much anymore. More importantly, he did not wish for an assassin like this to come and go as she pleased while he was recovering in the myriad poison cult, threatening him at any time. The poison on Yin Qing erupted with 10 times, 100 times more intensity. Her eyes became covered with green veins, shriveling up in the blink of an eye. Her ears, eyes, mouth, and nose that she had been carefully protecting the entire time immediately became useless. She could no longer see, hear, or smell anything. She was alarmed, but she did not panic. She immediately used a spatial movement technique and hid in space. However, the poison spread madly. If this continued, she definitely could not last for much longer. The myriad poison ancestor did not move at all. He maintained his posture of raising his hands high into the air, circulating his powers at full strength. Blood constantly oozed out of his mouth, but the corner of his lips curled into a cruel, vengeful smile. He did not need to take too long. He only needed to last for a while, and she would die from the poison. Then he would return to the myriad poison cult to recover and take revenge on Li Qingshan. This time, even if he had to cast aside his pride and beg the honored guests he was on good terms with, he would still kill Li Qingshan no matter what. But in reality, there was a thought that even he was reluctant to admit. Compared to revenge, it was better described as self-protection. The battle had scared him. If he allowed Li Qingshan and Little N to continue cultivating, regardless of which one of them underwent the third heavenly tribulation, it would be his death. Blood sprayed from the myriad poison ancestor's mouth violently. Suddenly, he looked back at the horizon and saw a streak of fire fly over. Li Qingshan saw the myriad poison ancestor from afar. Before he could even celebrate, he felt the poison he had suppressed after so much suddenly erupt violently, corroding his body and even his soul wildly. He could not help but be surprised. This old bastard still has something like that. Though, it seems like he can't move when he uses this move. If I make him sit on the jade throne and use it calmly, it'll really be troublesome. Unbeknownst to Li Qingshan, that was what the myriad poison ancestor originally planned to do, but unfortunately, he did not even have the opportunity to use it before his defenses were breached and he was forced into dire straits. After being heavily injured, he became even more afraid of using it carelessly. With what Li Qingshan was capable of, he could kill the myriad poison ancestor in a single punch before he could even die from the poison. At this moment, Li Qingshan and Little and were basically innocent bystanders, but unknowingly, they had helped Yin Qing shoulder a lot of the pressure. The myriad poison ancestor, on the other hand, felt the pressure multiply. The more poison he detonated, the more pressure he had to endure. His wounds worsened even further. Although he was tempted to throw his life at Li Qingshan or focus his attention and kill the Azura with poison first, he saw how Li Qingshan paused before charging over again. Although he was much slower now, it would not take long either. He immediately paled in shock. He was no longer bold enough to persist any longer, dispelling the technique in a hurry and flying away. Yin Qing used the last bit of her strength to leap out of the space there. She could not hold on any longer and fell down. Li Qingshan caught her and said, "Thank you for your trouble." He sent her back into the Azura field before handing the Azura field to Little Anne. He told her, take her back to Savage Mountain to cure her of the poison. Little Anne hesitated before nodding. She had also been affected by the myriad poison ancestor's myriad poison burial. The poison had flared up again, so she did not have as great a recovery rate as Li Qingshan. If she persisted in the pursuit, it would probably cause even greater damage to her body of white bones that she had refined after so much difficulty. Li Qingshan flew off as his scarlet eyes locked onto the speck of green light. He only had a single thought in his head, which was to prevent the myriad poison ancestor from fleeing back to the myriad poison cult safely. In the sky, a streak of green light was in front and a streak of scarlet light was in close pursuit. They moved with lightning speed, covering 1,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Both of them were fighting with their lives on the line. The myriad poison ancestor's wounds worsened, so he was nowhere close to his peak condition. Li Qingshan was quite injured too, and he was poisoned, but he possessed a fierce fighting spirit that only grew stronger as the battle progressed. He circulated his demon core and flapped his wings, rapidly closing the distance between them. A while later, the tip of the scarlet light had basically touched the tail of the green light. They were less than 5 kilometers apart. Chapter 820. The myriad poison ancestor ravished with joy. He glanced back, but his pursuer was nowhere to be seen. It was Qingshan. He was clearly a demon with scarlet eyes, fire-like hair, ox horns, and a tiger's tail. His murderousness and malice combined into demon chi, surging into the air and pressing over. Without the demonic armor's concealment, everything seemed extremely clear. The myriad poison ancestor wondered, the Chan monastery of Devanaga is an orthodox school of Buddhism, so why would they accept a demon as a disciple? And that Little and definitely isn't human either, which is why he can resist my poison. He could vaguely make out the 2 words, North Moon, engraved on the ox horns. Suddenly, he recalled an incident from several years ago. Back then, it had spread like wildfire among the upper echelon of the Mist Province's cultivation community. The Dragon King of the Sea of the Green Province had suddenly entered the territory of the Mist Province. Originally, they thought he had some sort of dispute with the Banyan Tree King, but only afterwards did they find out he was hunting down a demon. The demon's name seemed to be North Moon. The myriad poison cult rapidly drew closer and larger, about to arrive in a moment. The myriad poison ancestor no longer had any qualms. He swung his sleeves backwards, and with a great boom, a ring of green light exploded. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed, reflecting the green light. At such a distance and with such speed, it was impossible for him to dodge in time. He bellowed out and smashed through the green light with a punch, but he could not help but slow down. However, the myriad poison ancestor used the recoil to move even faster, immediately pulling away from Li Qingshan. He did not forget to leave behind a vicious threat filled with resentment. Li Qingshan, I will never forget today's grievance. I will definitely repay you generously. You better survive today first. Li Qingshan extended his hand towards the myriad poison ancestor from afar and pressed down. The ox demon's gravity. The myriad poison ancestor immediately felt his body become 100 times heavier. Suddenly, he plummeted down, colliding against a mountain on the ground. He adjusted his body in a hurry and shot past the top of the mountain, creating a gully. What move is this? Li Qingshan raised his hand, and the myriad poison ancestor immediately became as light as a feather. Not only did the gravity completely vanish, but it even produced a repulsive force instead. He suddenly drifted upwards, rushing towards the horizon. While flying at full speed, it was extremely difficult to control his body. Moreover, he was seriously injured. His body suddenly undulated as he moved, slowing down a lot. However, while he was in a horrible shape, he still flew towards the myriad poison cult at the end of the day. The gravity of the earth was unable to cause him any actual harm, and Li Qingshan had to split his attention to use his innate ability, so his speed was affected too. If this continued, the myriad poison ancestor would escape, so he frowned too. Could it be that I have to let him escape this calamity? What should I do? It's a pity that although this gravity field is not useless, it can only distract the enemy. It would be great if it could lure him to me. Wait. Li Qingshan's eyes suddenly lit up as he understood something. In the past, he had complained that the ox demon trample was useless and difficult to use, but now, it was his most powerful innate divine ability. No matter who the enemy was, he only needed to throw a punch. Could the third innate ability of the ox demon really only be used as an assistant and to distract the enemy? Li Qingshan paused and stopped flapping the phoenix wings. Seeing this, the myriad poison ancestor felt extremely regretful. This kid sure is decisive. He's flexible with his actions. If he's bold enough to chase me to the vicinity of the myriad poison cult, I can activate the formation and heavily injure him. I didn't think he'd actually give up. Li Qingshan's body tensed up, becoming as firm as a mountain and as steady as the earth. However, he gave up on the pursuit and used an innate ability that did not possess any offensive power at all, the strength of the earth. As long as he was on the ground, the second innate ability of the ox demon could provide him with endless power and make his strength even greater. A large part of the ox demon's great strength relied on this innate ability. However, because this innate ability was not visible, it often gave people the false impression that it had never been used before. It did adhere to the ox demon's lineage, which was discreet and profound. As a matter of fact, Li Qingshan would sometimes overlook the assistance this innate ability could provide him. With the imperial heaven above and the earth below, they ruled over everything. The imperial heaven was supreme. The sun and moon shone brightly, and the stars were far away. They were like the father of all life. Lightning, rain, and dew were all his benevolence. The earth below was vast, and the mountains stretched on endlessly. She was like the mother of all life, nourishing all life with great virtue. All life revered the imperial heaven, and cultivators pursued the heavenly way painstakingly. Who cared about the earth beneath their feet? They called it the earthly way. As a result, Li Qingshan spread his arms. I am the child of the earth. The myriad poison cult was right in front of him. The myriad poison ancestor only needed a few seconds to arrive, while he had already pulled an extremely great distance away from Li Qingshan. No matter what he was capable of, it would all be useless. He could finally rest and heal in peace before thinking about a plan for revenge. His instincts told him that he could make use of his identity as the North Moon. Perhaps he could destroy Li Qingshan's reputation and crush him to smithereens without even shedding a single drop of blood. As he thought, he suddenly halted, but after a few ups and downs, he was already prepared. He would not be affected so easily anymore. But this time, he discovered that the invisible power did not make him fall down. Instead, it pulled him backwards. Li Qingshan used the gravity of the earth again, but he used the strength of the earth to change the direction of gravity and pull the myriad poison ancestor towards him. He did not move at all. Even his murderousness had thinned out, replaced by a vast and heavy aura. He unleashed the strength of the ox demon. The power was invisible and intangible, but it could not be cut off or severed, gripping the myriad poison ancestor firmly. In shock, he discovered that not only did his speed become slower and slower, but he actually came to a halt in the end against his will, gradually drawing closer to Li Qingshan. The myriad poison ancestor's expression changed in shock. He let out a hoarse roar, desperately wrestling with the power. If he were in peak condition, he could probably put up a fight, but he was heavily injured right now. In order to pull away from Li Qingshan, he was even willing to worsen his wounds. He was already at the end of his tether. Li Qingshan was rather injured too, but the strength of the earth was something he could unleash at full strength no matter what state he was in, even if he was heavily injured or on the brink of death. If he wrestled with someone using the earth as his foundation, he was confident that he would never lose, no matter what form it was. The myriad poison ancestor watched helplessly as the myriad poison cult grew further and further away, while Li Qingshan drew closer and closer. Finally, he began to panic. Li Qingshan, you really are going to fight me to the death. I'm an honored guest of the King of Southern Yu's estate. If you kill me, the King of Southern Yu will never spare you. Li Qingshan's expression was determined. He said nothing, possessing a tenacity that would never stop until he achieved his objective. No matter how the myriad poison ancestor threatened, scared, tempted, or begged for mercy, he remained unfazed. I'm going to kill you today. 5 kilometers, 5 kilometers, a kilometer, 300 meters, 30 meters, 3 meters, die. Li Qingshan let out an extremely delighted roar and threw a punch at the myriad poison ancestor's old face. Chapter 8:21. The power of tremors spread through the myriad poison ancestor's entire body. Cracks covered him like a spider's web, and he collapsed silently. Suddenly, a streak of green light shot towards Li Qingshan's forehead. It moved several times faster than the myriad poison ancestor when he was in peak condition, and under the pull of the gravity of the earth right now, it was even faster than before. Even Li Qingshan could not respond in time. He caught a glimpse of it and saw that the green light was a fist-sized infant. It was half-transparent and resembled the myriad poison ancestor slightly. Its face was filled with resentment. A soul nascence. After undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, human cultivators would convert their golden core into a soul nascence, condensing their cultivation within their soul. Even if their body was destroyed, it would not be life-threatening. All they had to do was find a new body, and they could possess it and be reborn. Existences at the third heavenly tribulation were very difficult to kill. Demon kings were because of their tough bodies and startling life force. As for human cultivators, they relied on the mysteries of soul nascence. If they chose to flee, they would be extremely difficult to capture, and at certain times, they even possessed the power to reverse life and death. The myriad poison ancestor had launched a counterattack at a critical moment. This was the first time Li Qingshan had seen a soul nascence either. Let alone being unprepared, even if he had been prepared, he would not have been able to respond in time. With a flash of green light, the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence vanished. Li Qingshan froze, maintaining his posture of swinging his fist. Even the delight on his face had not been completely erased. Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan. If I didn't have any way of fighting back, wouldn't I have blown up my soul nascence immediately and taken you down with me? I didn't want to use this move originally, but you've gone too far. Now, I'll make you understand the difference between us. Green light illuminated Li Qingshan's sea of consciousness. The myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence descended with the might of a sovereign. It was both delighted from turning the tables, but it was also filled with resentment and reluctance. Although a destroyed body could be reborn through possession, the price they had to pay would be extremely great too. As a result, no great cultivator would choose this path unless they had no other choice. The myriad poison ancestor had also been forced into dire straits, putting up a desperate struggle. He was confident that he had the situation under control. No matter how many magical abilities Li Qingshan had, it would be difficult for him to use them in his knowledge sea. No matter how strong his body was, there was still a qualitative difference between a mere spirit and his nascent soul. Although this was Li Qingshan's home ground, in this confrontation of the sea of consciousness, he undoubtedly had the absolute advantage. What was left to do was to completely crush Li Qingshan's thoughts and then completely occupy this body. Although I've condensed a nascent soul, I've been stuck at the early stage, unable to make a breakthrough. Originally, I had no hope of breaking through to the fourth heavenly tribulation. This body is as strong as a demon king's. It will definitely increase my strength greatly. Even if there are some conflicts and discomfort, it won't be too much of a loss. Li Qingshan, all your hard work has gone to me. But before that, he wanted to listen to Li Qingshan's cries for mercy and enjoy the pleasure of revenge. If you beg me and listen to my instructions, this old man can consider sparing your life. The myriad poison ancestor sent out a thought, but the green light from the nascent soul became even more dazzling, contaminating Li Qingshan's knowledge sea like poison. Demon suppression. Li Qingshan bellowed out inside, and it exploded in his knowledge sea like thunder. The demon suppression statuary's primary purpose was to suppress the demonic nature within oneself, and only then did it suppress the demonic path in the outside world. In that moment, the inside and the outside had become one. The strength of Li Qingshan's demonic nature went without saying. The myriad poison ancestor was a powerful figure of the demonic path too. The demon suppression tower appeared in the sea of consciousness, as large as a mountain. It crushed down viciously towards the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul. With a boom, the green light vanished. The myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul was suppressed beneath the tower. Chains of demon suppression as thick as dragons crisscrossed, locking the demon suppression tower firmly. If you beg me, I might even spare your life. Li Qingshan's voice rang out in his knowledge sea. Even he had never expected the demon suppression statuary to be so powerful. It truly was a special cultivation method of the Chan monastery of Devanaga after all. Child's play. In the demon suppression tower, the myriad poison ancestor bellowed out. Immediately, the pitch-black demon suppression tower was dyed green, shining with green light. Oh no! Li Qingshan visualized the demon suppression statues and used the demon suppression statuary as hard as he could, pouring all the remaining demonic energy in his demon heart into the demon suppression tower to contend against the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul. However, the demon suppression tower shook violently, and the green light grew brighter and brighter. Li Qingshan realized he had still underestimated the power of a nascent soul. He watched helplessly as the chains of demon suppression snapped one by one. With a great rumble, the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul burst out of the tower, shining with blinding light. His knowledge sea surged violently, as if a green sun had risen up from the ocean. With a kacha sound, a tiny crack appeared on the demon heart, and it became dim and lightless. Li Qingshan knew he could not even use the demon suppression statuary in a short amount of time, let alone summoning the demon suppression tower. You're just putting up a desperate struggle. You overestimate yourself. I'd like to see what else you've got. The myriad poison ancestor said. He felt like he had everything under control. He was prepared to viciously torture Li Qingshan's soul, releasing all of the resentment from the sneak attack and pursuit. Before he had even finished speaking, Li Qingshan said calmly, "The spirit turtle suppresses the seas." The spirit turtle manifested and descended from above. Compared to the demon suppression tower, the spirit turtle did not possess much might. Not only was it much smaller than the demon suppression tower, but it descended very slowly too. It shone with a faint glow as it descended slowly at a steady pace. However, wherever the light shone, the churning sea of consciousness calmed down. The green light seemed to freeze too, losing its original might. What? The myriad poison ancestor paled in fright. There were not a lot of cultivators who specially practiced techniques for battles in the sea of consciousness. Normally, at a time like this, it would be a clash of the strength of their souls and consciousnesses, let alone demons. The strength of the demon suppression tower that Li Qingshan had summoned had already left the myriad poison ancestor extremely surprised. He never thought he would have an even stronger move. Ha, you want to fight me? Let's see who's the one putting up a desperate struggle and overestimating themselves. Li Qingshan sniggered. As someone who practiced the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, he did not have any shortcomings. He was flawless both inside and out. Whether it was a clash of techniques, melee combat, or a clash of consciousnesses, he had a set of methods to deal with them all. When the myriad poison ancestor smashed through the demon suppression tower, he seemed unstoppable, but he had actually exhausted quite a lot of his strength. His soul nascence was no longer as bright as it was in the beginning, shrouded in a layer of dullness. Although he resisted as hard as he could, the spirit turtle suppresses the seas was far more powerful than the demon suppression statuary. The spirit turtle pressed down on the green light inch by inch. It seemed slow, but it was unquestionable, all the way until it reached the top of the soul nascence's head. As it turned out, only 3 inches of green light remained, but it was extremely condensed as well. They entered a stalemate for a moment. However, Li Qingshan had the water god seal to replenish him, while the myriad poison ancestor was alone and helpless. Before long, only 2 inches of green light remained. The outcome had already been determined. Chapter 822. The figure of the spirit turtle hovered above the myriad poison ancestor's head, no longer pressing down. However, it continued to shine. Li Qingshan definitely did not believe the myriad poison ancestor did not have the determination to fight to the death. Most importantly, the spirit turtle's suppression could not be completed in a single moment. It was enough for him to consider. If the soul nascence exploded in his sea of consciousness, he would definitely be smashed to pieces. No matter how tough his body was, no matter how startling his regenerative powers were, he would not be able to escape death. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh. This myriad poison ancestor sure was difficult to deal with. He had succeeded in launching a sneak attack while he was off guard, and then he made the Azura assassin Yin Qing keep him busy while he hunted him down. In this battle, Little N had basically lost his battle prowess. Yin Qing was heavily injured and on the brink of death, yet he had almost managed to escape. He had finally broken through after so much difficulty and thought he could finally kill him, but he still ended up in a stalemate in the end. Hurry up and stow this turtle away, or I'll take you down with me. The myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence clenched its fist, filled with viciousness and determination. Li Qingshan did not stow the spirit turtle away. Instead, he smiled. Myriad poison, you've cultivated arduously for 1,000 years, and you've only undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation after so much difficulty and condensed a soul nascence, yet you keep mentioning taking me down with you at the drop of a hat. Who do you think you're trying to scare? Even though he was not bold enough to force the myriad poison ancestor into dire straits, he was underestimating Li Qingshan's courage if he thought he could do whatever he wanted just because he said he would take him down with him. He believed that as long as the myriad poison ancestor had a sliver of hope, he would not choose such a terrible plan. If it was an ordinary cultivator who had fallen to this state, they might have thrown caution to the wind in despair. But a great cultivator, although they had the same emotions as mortals and would be affected by emotions, they would not lose their rationality in the most fundamental aspect of their temperament. I've already lived enough. You're in the prime of your life, yet you're already capable of something like this at such a young age. Even the princes of the Dragon Province can't match you. My life hasn't been lived in vain if an old coot with no future like me can end a genius like you. The myriad poison ancestor was in dire straits, but he instead recovered some of his bearing and said slowly. You're flattering me. I'm just a young kid, how can I be compared to you? The two of them spoke one after another. One said that the other had a profound cultivation and that it was not easy to cultivate, the other praised the other for his talent and boundless future. If others were to hear this, they would think that they were courting each other. At this time, whoever cherished his own life more would be under the control of others. I've heard that soul nascence is extremely profound. As long as you find a suitable body, it won't affect your cultivation apart from wasting some time. Li Qingshan gave the myriad poison ancestor some hope. Alas, this old man has failed miserably and fallen into a hopeless situation. How can I dare to think about the future? I might as well give up. The myriad poison ancestor sighed, and his soul nascence suddenly began to tremble. A terrifying power that could destroy everything was about to be unleashed. What do you want? Li Qingshan asked calmly. He arrived high up in the atmospheric winds and flapped his wings of wind, flying in the direction of Savage Mountain. Then he tossed the two Sumeru rings into the water mirror's image, teleporting them to his clone in the Marsh of Cloud Dream. These were his and the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru rings respectively. He prepared for the worst-case scenario as he racked his brain to come up with a plan. If the demon core escaped far enough away, then even if the myriad poison ancestor blew up his soul nascence, he could maintain a ray of light and be reborn. This could be regarded as his final trump card. However, once the demon core left, his strength would weaken drastically, and he would immediately lose control over the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence, giving him the opportunity to escape instead. As a result, he needed to use the water mirror's image to teleport the demon core to his clone the moment the myriad poison ancestor blew himself up. This timing was far too difficult to grasp. If he escaped too early, the myriad poison ancestor would stop blowing himself up, but if he escaped too late, the demon core would be sucked into the explosion. How could he still have the opportunity to undergo rebirth? Even if he used the spirit turtle's divination abilities to grasp the timing, rebirth would still take him many years to recover. When he turned into a phoenix's embryo, he could not even maintain a basic level of consciousness. It could be described as the worst possible plan. However, a worst possible plan was still a plan. It was better than having no plan at all. Li Qingshan made up his mind. At most, I'll just risk rebirth again. Who's afraid of who? Send me back to the myriad poison cult, and we'll mind our own business from here on out. The myriad poison ancestor stated his conditions. Ha, you sure can dream on. If I go back to the myriad poison cult, you'll probably activate the formations and trap me the moment you emerge. Li Qingshan stalled for time as he sped up. As long as he returned to Savage Mountain, he could get Little N's clever brain to come up with a solution, not to mention the fact that he had the Banyan Tree King, whose wisdom was as deep as the ocean. I won't make things difficult for you. There's no need for me to go to the myriad poison cult. I just need to be at the edge of the myriad poison cult. Remove this turtle and let me sense the outside world, and I'll leave, said the myriad poison ancestor. Li Qingshan fell silent. Only when the myriad poison ancestor pressed him did he say, since you already know my identity, you'll definitely make it public when you get back. If the Dragon King of the Sea comes knocking, I won't be able to deal with him. The myriad poison ancestor happened to be planning this. Originally, he planned on feigning ignorance about the matter between the North Moon and the Dragon King of the Sea, but now that he had been exposed, there was nothing he could do. He answered with a question, "What do you want? Do you really want me to die with you?" As he said that, he assumed a posture like he was about to blow up his soul nascence again. If that's what you want, then do as you please. Even the Dragon King of the Sea couldn't kill me in the past, so you won't be any different. Li Qingshan said coldly. All right, all right, all right. Then I'll try and see if I can drag you down with me, said the myriad poison ancestor. All of his accumulated resentment seemed to erupt, making him rather hysterical. The green light in the core of the soul nascence grew brighter and brighter. Li Qingshan tensed up and immediately stopped flying. A piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out before him. It was as bright as a mirror, but it reflected the situation in Cloud Dream Marsh almost 50,000 kilometers away. He spat out the demon core, which stopped on the edge of the mirror. But a while later, when he saw how Li Qingshan did not respond at all, the soul nascence on the verge of erupting settled down again. The myriad poison ancestor said viciously, "Kid, you sure are something. Just let me stay in your sea of consciousness the entire time. I'd like to see how you cultivate." The older people got, the more they cherished their lives. They lacked the bravery and vigor of young people. They had gone through so much to reach their current level of cultivation. Unless they had no other choice, they would never choose the path of mutual destruction no matter what. And, the fact that Li Qingshan had managed to escape from the Dragon King of the Sea did indeed make him fearful. If he threw his life on the line, Li Qingshan would be alive and kicking again in a decade or so. That would be a great loss. This kid had far too many tricks up his sleeves. Though, since he wants to negotiate with me, he's still afraid of me blowing up my soul nascence at the end of the day. Even if he can escape alive, he'll either not have too much confidence, or he'll have to pay an extremely heavy price, or both. I refuse to believe you can trap me in your sea of consciousness for the rest of my life. Let's see who can outlast the other. You better calm down. Let's come up with a plan that satisfies both sides. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud, but he was sweating inside, as even when his soul nascence was about to explode, he still had not grasped the opportunity accurately. All he could do was gamble. Chapter 823. The myriad poison ancestor's poison sure is potent. Is there anything I can do about it, Senior Tree King? Ru Xian crossed her arms and asked, pointing at her chin. They were in a tree hole beneath the great banyan tree. It was composed of huge, intertwined roots. It was extremely spacious, filled with the fragrance of resin. Yin Qing laid on a platform composed of roots. Her body had been reduced to a humanoid shape by the poison, and her aura was extremely feeble. A droplet of yellow-green venom dripped from her body, kicking up a puff of white smoke when it landed on the ground. As an Azura, her body and life force far surpassed regular cultivators or even demon commanders, but she did not possess a heaven-defying cultivation method like the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine or the path of white bone and great beauty after all. She still could not endure the myriad poison ancestor's poison. All I can do is maintain her life force, but the poison is still deeply rooted, spreading and strengthening by devouring her life force. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook a meal without rice. The unique secret technique of the myriad poison cult requires a corresponding antidote. It all depends on whether he can bring back the myriad poison ancestor's Sumeru ring. The banyan tree king's voice echoed through the tree hole. A dark green aerial root fell down, injecting sap into Yin Qing's blood. This guy is very petty. He'll stare back even if he's glared at him. Myriad poison has offended him, so what good fate awaits him? Ru Xian smiled. Li Qingshan chatted with the myriad poison ancestor as he flew through the sea of trees. Compared to the nervousness and intensity he felt earlier, he was much more relaxed now. However, the myriad poison ancestor's existence was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. He had to get it out. When the sky darkened, Savage Mountain came into view. The huge hole blasted open in the clouds had already closed up and vanished. It was currently drizzling. Little Anne stood on the top of the tall tower on the main peak. Her black hair was like mist, about to merge with the rain. Only when she saw Li Qingshan's figure did her lips curl into a smile and fly over to receive him. Li Qingshan told Little N everything that had happened, but Little N was unable to come up with a good idea immediately. I better ask the Banyan Tree King for help. How's Yin Qing? Li Qingshan asked as he passed through the fog. Ruexian's injuries are under control, and she's currently thinking of a way to detoxify the poison, Little N said. Ruexian? I almost forgot that she's also a disciple of the School of Medicine. Let's go and take a look. Li Qingshan was very friendly to those who served and helped him. After passing through the 8-directional foggy sea formation, the valley was filled with rain and fog. The towering trees were soaked by the rain, and their color was especially deep. Even the mountains were dyed black. Seeing this familiar scenery, Li Qingshan couldn't help but relax, and a relieved smile appeared on his face. Although there was still a great threat that hadn't been eliminated, he had still won this battle. His ears twitched as if he had heard something. I heard you bad-mouthing me from 10 miles away. Li Qingshan lifted the green vine curtain and walked in, glaring at him. I'll tell you. Ruexian shrugged. How is it? The Banyan Tree King asked. A great cultivator's fate was extremely important. If the myriad poison ancestor had died, he would definitely sense it. Since he did not sense it, it meant the myriad poison ancestor had already fled, which made sense too. Third heavenly tribulation great cultivators were not that easy to kill after all. However, he had to consider this. If the myriad poison ancestor fled back to the myriad poison cult, then Li Qingshan's dual identities would definitely be exposed to the world. The reactions of the Hawkwolf Guard and the Chan Monastery of Devanaga would all be a small matter. If the Dragon King of the Sea pursued him everywhere, then that would be a huge problem. As a result, the Banyan Tree King had to consider how to mediate between them. I've dealt with it, Li Qingshan said calmly. You've dealt with it? A hint of surprise appeared in the Banyan Tree King's voice. Though, there's still a small problem. That old bastard's soul nascence ran into my sea of consciousness and refused to leave, so I've temporarily suppressed it. I still need to ask for your guidance. Let's cure Yin Qing first. With a wave of his hand, Li Qingshan unleashed the water mirror's image again and retrieved the 2 Sumeru rings. However, it took quite a bit of effort to open them. In the end, he still had to ask the Banyan Tree King for assistance, and only then did he manage to open them. After a great battle, Li Qingshan was extremely exhausted, and he even had to split his attention to suppress the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence. Through this small matter, he became even more aware of just how unpleasant it was for the myriad poison ancestor to remain in his sea of consciousness. Normally, it would be fine, but if he encountered another great battle and the old bastard messed around in his sea of consciousness, he would use up 50% of his strength at the very least. If he accidentally allowed the old bastard to grasp an opening, he might even face the danger of turning the tables. Cultivation went even more without a doubt. This bastard was truly an inner demon. It's no wonder that old bastard can keep stalling away calmly. His existence has blocked off my future prospects. There were many bottles and jars in the myriad poison ancestor's Sumeru ring. If he asked Li Qingshan to look for the antidote, he really would have no idea where to start. It was all thanks to the Banyan Tree King's great knowledge that he found a glass bottle. An aerial root sucked up some of the medicine and sprayed it on Yin Qing. The poison immediately diluted by a lot. Li Qingshan and Little N also ingested the antidote according to what the Banyan Tree King had taught them, completely eliminating the threat of the poison. The Banyan Tree King sprinkled some more tree sap, and Yin Qing's wounds healed rapidly. Before long, she slowly woke up, and her eyes that had been blinded by the poison regained their brightness. She murmured, I'm still alive. This isn't the Azura realm. She had thought she would be reborn in the Azura realm. Through this battle, she had proven once again just how dangerous it was to provoke an entire major realm of cultivation above her. I haven't even allowed you to die yet. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. The banyan tree king said, "It's all thanks to the Azura realm that my life is no longer in danger. However, it's unavoidable that my strength will be affected, so I need to be mentally prepared." Yin Qing nodded slightly, expressing that she understood. This was not the Azura realm after all. Even if she was injured, she could recover slowly. "You've done a great service this time, so I'll reward you handsomely. I'm willing to repay you with my body. What do you think?" Li Qingshan patted Yin Qing's shoulder with a smile. A cool, moist breeze blew into the tree hole, and Yiliosu lifted the curtain and entered. She glanced at Li Qingshan and pursed her lips. Ru Xian chuckled, but she said nothing. Shaoan was emotionless and incorporeal. "Cough, cough, I was just telling a joke to liven up the atmosphere." "What's with your expressions? You don't have the slightest sense of humor." Even with how thick-skinned Li Qingshan was, he felt slightly embarrassed. Of course, it was only a tiny bit. He had gone as far as to rope in his subordinates for the sake of his great ambitions. Yin Qing burst out laughing. This king sure had a lot of romantic debts. She recovered soon afterwards. "My king's valiance in battle has left me in great admiration, but the reward is far too great. I'm just a willow, so I'm not blessed enough. I really can't handle it. I think it's better if he rewards me instead." Li Qingshan acted like he did not hear Ru Xian's mocking laughter. He instructed her gently, "Return to the Azura field and recuperate for now. I'll find a way to help you recover your strength." After sending Yin Qing to the Azura field, he passed the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring to Ru Xian. "Take a look and see if there's anything you need." Ru Xian did not hold back, searching through it carefully. The myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring was extremely well stocked. It contained the cultivation methods and resources of the entire myriad poison cult, which would be extremely helpful to her plan. Chapter 824. As long as a cultivator survived 3 heavenly tribulations, even if they didn't cultivate the Tao of divination, they would still have a premonition of the heavenly secrets. Not to mention the fact that great cultivators would normally try to find ways to make up for this. Even if they could not devise ingenious strategies, at least they would not be able to devise ingenious strategies. They had sufficient energy and ability anyway. The myriad poison ancestor was no different. He could find a way to interfere with or even suppress the myriad poison ancestor's premonition. A large part of the reason why the myriad poison ancestor had suffered such a humiliating defeat was because Li Qingshan and Little and both possessed the ability to interfere with the heavenly secrets. Otherwise, how could Little and have succeeded with a sneak attack? Even if he was slightly stronger, he would still be overwhelmed by the myriad poison ancestor. His life might even be in danger. Among the various mysteries of the heavens, there was one that was the most difficult to interfere with, and that was the ability to sense one's own life and death. As the saying goes, life and death matters. Many mortals who have experienced a lot of danger would be able to sense it, let alone a great cultivator who had cultivated for 1,000 years and was aware of fate. The myriad poison ancestor's body had been destroyed, leaving behind only his soul nascence, so this premonition would only become sharper. In other words, no matter what method Li Qingshan came up with to kill him, he would have enough time to react and explode his nascent soul. Doesn't that mean there's no solution? Li Qingshan frowned slightly. He was a little annoyed. His Phoenix Nirvana might not even succeed. If he was not careful, he would really end up dying together with his opponent. There is still a solution. The Banyan Tree King wanted to say something but stopped. Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist. Li Qingshan cupped his hands. There's an old friend in the southern sea that's skilled in creating illusions. It's capable of causing one to fall into a state of confusion and make the fake become real. If he's willing to help, then this calamity can be easily resolved. Ru Xian was concentrating on reading a book of poison, and she raised her head in surprise when she heard this. Are you talking about the Mirage CCC King? That's right. It's the Clam King of Mirage Sea, the Banyan Tree King said. Clam King of Mirage Sea. Li Qingshan mumbled to himself. He had read about this name in a book before. Among the 72 demon kings, he was the most mysterious one. Because he had always lived in a place called the Mirage Sea, in the South China Sea, and never left the sea border, it seemed that he had not done any major events that affected the 9 regions, so there were only a few records about him. With the Clam King of Mirage Sea's abilities, there's no one more suitable than this. I just need to lure this myriad poison into an illusion for a moment, and I'll have plenty of ways to deal with him. But will he help me? Are there any conditions? Li Qingshan was doubtful. While there were strong and weak demon kings among the 72 demon kings, as long as they had not ascended or died, and they had accumulated a few thousand years, they were basically at the level of the Dragon King of the Sea. Even 10 myriad poisons might not be able to defeat them, and 10 Li Qingshan naturally might not be able to defeat them either. It was best not to provoke the dragon and tiger just to deal with the wolf and the fox, and end up in a hopeless situation. There's no need for any conditions. He'll definitely help you. Go to the South China Sea and look for him. The Banyan Tree King changed his hesitant attitude just now and said with certainty. So you trust this Clam King of Mirage Sea so much? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. In the years he had known the Banyan Tree King, this old man had always left some leeway in his words. The world was unpredictable, and even with his intelligence, he could not predict everything. Only by leaving leeway could one be at ease, and it was very rare for him to be this resolute. He could not help but wonder. Don't tell me the Clam King of Mirage Sea is actually a female demon. There's something going on between the two of them. Speaking of which, the South China Sea and the Mist Province are right next to each other, and the two of them never leave their territory either, so it does seem like they're watching over each other from afar. Don't let your thoughts run wild. I understand his personality very well. As long as you claim to be my subordinate, he definitely won't make things difficult for you based on our many years of friendship, said the Banyan Tree King. Ru Xian raised an eyebrow and glanced at Li Qingshan. She wanted to say something, but the Banyan Tree King's voice rang out in her head. I know you come from the South China Sea. Don't say anything else. How strange. He's even stopping me from saying anything. Though, the Banyan Tree King shouldn't harm him, so I'll just wait and see for now. Ru Xian thought. Coincidentally, Little N's clear, deep eyes looked over. Ru Xian communicated, Don't tell me you've also received a warning from the Banyan Tree King? Little N withdrew his gaze silently, basically tacitly agreeing to it. He fell into thought slightly. There were only a few descriptions of the Clam King of Mirage Sea in the books that Li Qingshan had read. According to the Banyan Tree King, there was no danger at all. However, the situation that Ru Xian and Little N knew was the exact opposite. The legends regarding the Mirage Sea were a horror story that Ru Xian had heard since she was young. According to the information Xiaoan had read, there were countless cultivators who had lost their lives there. Unlike the Endless Trench and the Perpetual Daylight Sea, which were renowned for being dangerous in the South China Sea, the location of the Mirage Sea was not fixed. Instead, it drifted freely in the South China Sea, which made it even more unpredictable. Whether it was a mortal or a cultivator, a human or a mutant, once they entered, they would find it difficult to find a way back. There were also survivors who managed to escape, but everyone's description of the Mirage Sea was different. Some said that it was a demonic island where ghosts and monsters roamed freely, while others said that it was a treasure mountain filled with gold and silver. This only added to the mysterious aura of the Mirage Sea. Because most of those who managed to escape were mortals, and not a single cultivator who was countless times stronger was able to escape, the mainstream view of the South China Sea cultivation world was, the Clam King of Mirage Sea intentionally vomits. She will release the clam gas and lure cultivators into a strange and dazzling illusion. Then, she will devour their essence and refine their souls into the clam gas, increasing the power of the illusion. Mortals are too weak and are not valued. Instead, they have a chance to slip through the net. Thus, the Mirage Sea was recognized as the #1 forbidden ground in the South China Sea. It was even more dangerous than the Ink Sea in the Azure Province. Li Qingshan, who knew nothing about this, seemed to be walking towards the abyss with his eyes closed. It was too strange that the Banyan Tree King did not allow anyone to remind him of this. "I'll have to rely on you again this time, fellow," Li Qingshan said in complete respect. After going through so much, he already trusted the Banyan Tree King very much. "It's just a small matter, so there's no need to take it to heart. I'm already very surprised that you've managed to force the myriad poison ancestor to this extent. Then I'll return to my dwelling and recuperate first. Once I recover, I'll set off for the South China Sea in search of the Clam King of Mirage Sea." Li Qingshan stood up and bid farewell. The Banyan Tree King said, "You can stay here and recuperate. I'll lend you a hand. Then I'll be troubling you, fellow. You can tell me what kind of demon that fellow Shen is. I'll have a way to deal with her once I see her." Li Qingshan agreed happily. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Under the Banyan Tree King's assistance, Li Qingshan had basically recovered from his wounds. His exhaustion was all gone. This was all thanks to him finding the antidote, or just purging the poison would have taken 10 times longer. The Banyan Tree King passed a wooden sea map to Li Qingshan and pointed with his roots. "According to my calculations, the Mirage Sea stops here right now. Go there quickly. Don't waste any time along the way, or who knows where you'll end up drifting to again." Over the past few days, Li Qingshan had gained a rough understanding of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's personality from his conversations with the Banyan Tree King. He was filled with confidence about this trip. After thanking the Banyan Tree King again, he set off for the South China Sea with Little and in search of the Mirage Sea. The Banyan Tree King watched Li Qingshan vanish into the horizon. Ru Xian's voice rang out from beneath the tree. "I never thought the Clam King of Mirage Sea would actually be a very kind person despite her vicious reputation. Who knows?" The Banyan Tree King's voice was filled with emotion. "Who knows? Isn't he an old friend of yours?" Ru Xian asked curiously. "The strangest old friend of mine, and while we're old friends, we're not exactly familiar with each other." The Banyan Tree King smiled. "We're old friends, but we're not familiar with each other." "Sure enough, it's very strange," Ru Xian said. "The strangest part is that he still hasn't undergone the 4th heavenly tribulation. I originally thought he should have ascended 3,000 years ago. Not only are we not familiar with each other, we don't even know if he's a man or a woman, as no one has ever seen his true form. Sometimes, he's extremely friendly, sometimes, he's filled with hostility. Even when C toured the coast of the South China Sea, he made a great joke out of him." The Banyan Tree King thought back to the matters from several thousand years ago in a leisurely manner. "CC." Ru Xian was taken aback. Only then did she remember who CC was. The founding emperor ruled over the 9 provinces and toured the world. He had once visited the Mist Province to visit the Banyan Tree King before descending south to the coast of the South China Sea. The subsequent emperors never did that again. Ru Xian had left the South China Sea when she was young, so she did not know much about the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Now that she heard about all of this, she could not help but sigh. In other words, this Clam King of Mirage Sea might not necessarily show respect to anyone. She's also so powerful that she doesn't have to show respect to anyone. "You could say that," said the Banyan Tree King. Ru Xian smiled. "Kid Li is in trouble this time. Why didn't you ask me why I didn't tell you to warn him?" asked the Banyan Tree King. "You have your reasons, don't you? And, does he even need me to warn him? That kid seems crude, but he's actually very cunning. There aren't a lot of people he trusts. If the mighty Banyan Tree King wants to deal with someone in the Mist Province, why would he send him to the distant South China Sea? Isn't that a very reasonable consideration? Said Ru Exin. It's no wonder he trusts you so much, said the Banyan Tree King. I just happen to understand how it feels to be unable to say certain things clearly. However, probably not everyone is as reasonable as me. Ru Exin gazed at the horizon as a sliver of worry flashed through her eyes. Little N is the person he trusts the most. He might not be willing to betray this trust. Most importantly, he's the only person she trusts. Whether it's the Banyan Tree King or herself, no matter how trustworthy they seem, they're all the same in her eyes. That child really is as strange as you can be. The Banyan Tree King sighed. You didn't come looking for me just to tell me this, did you? I have a question about the path of medicine that I want to ask you about. This also has to do with the success of the battle against Fire Melt Mountain. Ru Exin immediately became respectful. Let's hear it. After listening to Ru Exin's question, the Banyan Tree King fell silent for a very long time. The strong prey on the weak. Although the strong prey on the weak is also the way of nature, your actions are far too unjust. Chapter 825. The endless yellow sand stretched into the distance without end. There was no sign of human habitation. Broken walls and ancient cities of the past had worn away the totem murals, leaving only a monotonous yellow that spoke of the vicissitudes of 1,000 years. A few withered poplars twisted and stretched their withered bodies. Their withered branches pointed at the transparent blue sky, like hands struggling to break free from the sea of sand, only to be buried by the yellow sand in the end. Li Qingshan stood at the top of a sand dune and saw everything. This is the Mirage Sea. It should just be an illusion, Little N said. The sound of the wind carried their voices into the distance. Li Qingshan crouched down and grabbed a handful of sand. The grains of sand flowed between his fingers. Not a single grain could be seen as fake. There was even a voice telling him from the bottom of his heart that all of this was real. Under the guidance of the Banyan Tree King's sea map, they found the legendary Mirage Sea without much effort. Although he knew that the Mirage Sea was not simple after Little N's warning and might even contain great danger, he still chose to enter the Mirage Sea due to his trust in the Banyan Tree King and the Spirit Turtle's divination. There was no danger to his life here, so he still chose to enter the Mirage Sea. As expected of the Clam King of Mirage Sea. This illusion is flawless. However, while it's strange for a sea of sand to appear in the sea, it's not imaginative at all. Li Qingshan smiled and revealed his pure white fangs. But if we can't break the illusion, how can we find the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Little N said. Watch me. Li Qingshan said loudly, Clam King of Mirage Sea, this one is Li Qingshan. I have come to the Mirage Sea to pay a visit under the guidance of the Banyan Tree King. Please show yourself. This is a visitation card. The sound wave spread into the distance like a tiger's roar and created ripples on the sea of sand. However, there was no response. There was only the sound of the wind. Li Qingshan could not help but be surprised. He reached into his sumaru ring, but the visitation card that the Banyan Tree King had written for him was nowhere to be found. How was this possible? The sumaru ring was equivalent to an independent space. Was the Clam King of Mirage Sea really this powerful? Qingshan. Little N pulled Li Qingshan's sleeves and pointed to the distant sky. At the end of the sea of sand, there was a tall building that connected the sky and the earth. It looked a little vague in the heat waves. Let's go and take a look. Li Qingshan could not understand how he had lost the visiting card, so he decided not to think too much about it. Since the Clam King of Mirage Sea had already responded, everything would naturally become clear once they met and talked. She didn't use her phoenix wings and flew side by side with Little N. They flew very low, and the airwaves they set off plowed a long gully in the sea of sand, forming waves of sand. Under the illumination of the sun, they flashed with a golden light, extremely magnificent. Li Qingshan made a great vow to travel thousands of mountains and rivers and enjoy all the beautiful scenery in the world. Even though he knew that this sea of sand was an illusion, it was enough for him to enjoy. He looked at Little End beside him. Her skin was like jade, and her clothes were whiter than snow. Her black hair fluttered in the wind like a long ribbon. Her black and white were distinct, and there was only a slight smile on her red lips. She was so beautiful that she seemed like the spirit of the world, or even some kind of spirit that had gathered together. Perhaps it was the effect of this wondrous illusion, but Li Qingshan felt like this was the first time he had seen her like this. He also felt like he had been attached to her for 1,000 years. His eyes involuntarily gathered on those red lips, and for a moment, he was mesmerized. He almost wanted to kiss them, but he suddenly shook his head and threw this strange thought out of his mind. Little and only focused on him, so peaceful that it was like she was breathing. Li Qingshan suddenly smiled, and a child's heart stirred. He flew away from Little Anne and circled around the sea of sand. He used the airwaves to write 2 large, crooked words, Little Anne also smiled, and flew up to write the 3 words, Li Qingshan, but it was graceful and neat. Li Qingshan was not convinced, and wrote the 2 words, 9 heavens. Finally, it was a lot more square, and he could not help but laugh out loud. His hearty laughter shook the sand dunes below, and a stretch of gold flowed down. Little Anne also laughed, and her laughter was like silver bells, ethereal and dreamy. They continued forward, and the wind and sand behind them gradually buried the words they had written, leaving no trace. They flew and played all the way, but the mirage, in the distance, this was the name he had given to the tower, was even further away than he had imagined. It only became a little bigger after flying for a long time. Li Qingshan also stopped playing and stared at the mirage in the sky. The scope of the mirage sea could not be so large. It seemed like it was just as little, and said, this trip was not so simple. He hoped that it was just a test. Little Anne still did not change her expression, and looked at his back as if she was breathing heavily. Then, they sped up and flew straight toward the mirage. Suddenly, Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. A yellow line rose from the horizon, covering the mirage that connected the sky and the earth behind it. The yellow line gradually became smaller. It's a sandstorm. If it was just a natural sandstorm, Li Qingshan naturally would not care, but this was the Clam King of Mirage Sea's illusion. This sandstorm was definitely not so simple. Not only did the sandstorm cover the sky and the earth, it was also endless. Let's go down and hide for a while. I don't believe that it can blow us away. Li Qingshan said, and brought Little Anne to the ground, under a stone pillar that was almost drowned in yellow sand. This place was also in ruins, but the only thing that could protrude out of the sea of sand was this enormous stone pillar. There were some incomprehensible words and blurry images carved on it, but they all felt vaguely familiar. Li Qingshan looked closely. No. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. The words were English, which he had learned in his previous life, and the images were mathematical numbers. What? However, these things did not exist in this world. Could this illusion actually reflect one's thoughts? There was no time to think carefully. The whistling grew louder and louder, as if there was a huge mouth that connected the sky and earth blowing. In the blink of an eye, the sandstorm swallowed them, and the sky darkened. Li Qingshan discovered that his choice of hiding behind the stone pillar was the correct one. The intensity of the sandstorm actually made even his mind waver. He pulled Shaoan into his arms instinctively, but as he gazed into the distance, he was actually unable to see what was happening 30 meters away. He sighed inside. If this kind of power remained in the sky, they would definitely be blown away. The stone pillar carved on it was like a rock, allowing the sandstorm to attack it. I wonder when it will pass, Li Qingshan said to Little Anne, who was as light as a feather in his arms, and hugged her even tighter. Little N said something, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. What did you say? Li Qingshan asked telepathically. Before Little N could answer, he suddenly heard a bull's moo. It passed through the sandstorm clearly. The sound was so familiar and intimate, as if it was ringing in his heart. Li Qingshan stood up and looked over. In the dark sandstorm, the blurry silhouette of an old bull was looking back at him. Li Qingshan's eyes widened. He clearly saw a broken horn on the bull's head. Although he could not see it clearly, he was sure that it was green. He could not help but be shocked. This was the greatest secret hidden in his heart. It was even greater than his transmigration and reincarnation. Reincarnation and the memories of one's past life were nothing in the world of the 9 states. However, the existence of the green ox far surpassed this world. It was an existence above the 6 paths of reincarnation and above the 9 heavens. Shaoan, who was beside him, seemed to have seen nothing and leaned quietly in his arms. Was this also an illusion created by the Clam King of Mirage Sea? But it was too real. The ordinary oxen gave off an indescribable presence. The sandstorm and even the entire Mirage Sea seemed to distort as if it could not hold on. Wait for me, Li Qingshan said before rushing towards the black ox. Even if it was a hallucination, he wanted to see the big brother who had given him everything and parted with him for a very long time again. Little N reached out to grab the hem of his clothes, but it slipped out of her hands powerlessly. She watched as his figure disappeared into the sandstorm. The sandstorm was stronger than Li Qingshan had expected. Even with his strength and cultivation, it was difficult for him to move. The enormous force pressed down on him, forcing him to bend his body and walk towards Oxen. Oxen waved its tail and turned to walk into the sandstorm with its usual calm attitude. Li Qingshan's call was blown away by the sandstorm. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked back. The sandstorm obscured his vision. He was unable to see the stone pillar and Shaoan in the sea of sand. Suddenly, he felt rather lost, but he had no time to think too much about it. He chased after the black ox as hard as he could. The world was dusky yellow. Only that figure was clear. It was leading him into the unknown. But no matter how Li Qingshan chased, that figure was so far away. It gradually moved further and further away until it completely disappeared into the sandstorm. A bull's moo came from the distance. So it was just an illusion. Li Qingshan panted as he knelt on the sand. He suddenly opened his arms and shouted at the sky with the loudest voice he could muster, "I will go. Above the 9 heavens, I will definitely go." The sandstorm gradually subsided. Li Qingshan found the stone pillar. It had almost been submerged by the sand. The words and diagrams on it had all been worn away by the sandstorm. Below the stone pillar, there was nothing. There seems to be something here. Li Qingshan had a puzzled look. He reached out and touched the stone pillar. The stone pillar shattered silently. It turned into dust that was finer than sand and drifted away with the wind like smoke. Li Qingshan stood on the sand dune for a long time. He looked around. There was only a sea of sand and he was alone. He felt a slight pain in his heart. His eyes were a little moist. He shook his head hard and looked at the mirage in the sky. He still remembered. I have to go there to find the Sea Serpent King. With an inexplicable reluctance, he continued to move forward. He always wanted to look back, but he hated looking back the most. He gritted his teeth and strode forward. Soon, the sand dune was left behind, and it was no different from the thousands of other sand dunes. The wind blew gently. Li Qingshan's face was gloomy. He kept moving forward toward the mirage. The scenery on the road became more and more monotonous. There were no ancient ruins or ancient poplars. There were only sand dunes, like waves on the sea of sand. The sandstorm became denser and denser. He could only give up on flying and walk on the sea of sand. After walking for who knew how many days, or how many years, the sun always hung high above his head. It shone down scorching light, making him feel anxious. Even with the divine earth power, he felt tired. A layer of dust fell on his body. But he couldn't stop. The mirage was still there, getting closer and closer. Finally, after another sandstorm, Li Qingshan looked around. There was only an endless sea of sand. He stared at the sky. There should be something there. Chapter 826. Li Qingshan pondered for a while, but he was at a loss. Why was he in the center of this desert? His heart moved, and he looked inside his spirit and sea of consciousness, but there was nothing there, as if something was missing. The spirit that he had just raised relaxed again. However, he could not stay here. An indescribable great fear filled his heart, urging him to move forward quickly. He randomly chose a direction and staggered forward. There was no goal, no companion, not even an enemy. There was only the sandstorm coming one after another, and an indescribable great emptiness filled his heart. It kept expanding until it was the same as the whole desert, the whole heaven and earth. His face was sharpened until it was rough and blank. He could only keep moving forward, not daring to stop even a step, as if he would immediately be swallowed by this desert if he stopped. However, the exhaustion grew deeper and deeper. The earth no longer gave him endless support, but instead drew out his strength and spirit bit by bit. The desert was no longer golden, and the sky was no longer blue, as if the colors had been blown away by the sandstorm again and again. Finally, after a sandstorm, the sun also disappeared, leaving only the empty white sky and the endless stretch of pale white sea of sand. The sandstorm then subsided, and the sound of the wind also disappeared. Between heaven and earth, only he was still trudging with difficulty, listening to his own heavy breathing, stubbornly refusing to look back. He could not see that with every step he took, the footprints would immediately disappear, as if they had never existed. Time became blurry, and suddenly, the last of his willpower, like that stone pillar, collapsed with a loud bang. Finally, he collapsed on the desert. Perhaps this place could no longer be called a desert. There were no undulating sand dunes, only a boundless whiteness. His black eyes were blurry like frosted glass, looking at the distant blurry horizon. The white sand surged, drowning him inch by inch. Under the pitch-black sky, the continuous mountain range was like a crouching giant beast, quietly waiting for the dawn. Under a small hill shaped like a crouching bull, there was a small village. "Xiao Er, wake up!" A voice broke the silence of the entire world. A middle-aged peasant woman bent her back like a bucket and shouted. In a pile of hay in the cowshed, a skinny young man suddenly woke up from his sleep and thought blankly, "Who am I?" He looked around the dirty cowshed and felt the itch from the mosquito bites. Although it was a little uncomfortable, it was all so familiar and intimate. He gradually woke up from his dream, but that dream was so real that it felt surreal, as if everything in front of him was fake. However, when he recalled the dream, it quickly dissipated like a puff of smoke. He only vaguely remembered that it was an extremely terrifying nightmare that almost frightened him. He felt that he couldn't wake up, so he gave up thinking about it. Where else? Of course it's in our house. Waiter, don't sleep in the cowshed when the weather gets cold. Don't catch a cold. Dinner is ready, go eat. The middle-aged woman laughed. Her voice was rough, but it was filled with deep concern, causing the youth to feel warmth in his heart. "Oh right, I'm Lier. This is Crouching Ox Village. My parents are both farmers in Crouching Ox Village, but they passed away when I was young. It's all thanks to my elder brother and sister-in-law who took care of me." He stood up, and he immediately became taller than the sister-in-law. The sister-in-law sighed, "Sigh, the days sure pass quickly. In the blink of an eye, you're already as tall as your elder brother. In another 2 years, you'll be able to marry and have children. You need to prepare now. When your elder brother comes back from selling the cow, he'll tear down this cowshed and build a new house for you. I can't say it's better than anyone else, but it can't be worse than anyone else. With your talent, Xiao Heir, apart from caretaker Lu and village head Li's son, we won't accept anyone else in the village. Aya, the water's boiling. Hurry up and wash your face. Come eat. The sister-in-law rambled on for a while before hurrying to the kitchen. However, he only heard one sentence. When your elder brother comes back from selling the cow. Yes, this had been planned a long time ago. Because the old oxen that had accompanied him since he had grown up was almost too old to work, he planned on bringing it to town and selling it to the butcher for money to build a house for him. Back then, he was very reluctant, but there was nothing he could do. Farmers didn't all raise cows like this. However, when he recalled oxen's moist eyes, his heart shuddered. He murmured, "No, no, this can't be right." He rushed out of the cowshed and left the sister-in-law's cries behind. He followed the road to town and ran wildly. The morning breeze blew past his face, carrying the refreshing scent of vegetation. It almost drowned out the mountain path. He ran like he was flying, leaving behind countless crystalline droplets of dew. However, he had not eaten after all, and the nightmare seemed to have consumed too much of his strength. He felt tired very soon, but an indescribable urge urged him on. Go, go, go. Find the cow. After turning a corner, a familiar figure appeared in front of him. It was a middle-aged farmer with a simple face. He stopped in a hurry and grabbed the farmer's shoulder. Big brother, where's the cow? Waiter, come and pick me up. The cow has already been sold. Look, the money's here. It's a total of 11 taels of silver. It's enough for you to build a house and get married. Big brother Li patted the pouch on his shoulder and smiled honestly. I can't sell the cow, I can't sell it. I don't want to build a house and get married. He was frantic, rambling incoherently. I know you have feelings for the old cow. I'm the same, but this is its life. We can't just bury it underground. Big brother Li's face darkened and patted his shoulder. Where's the cow? He panicked inside and bellowed furiously. It's already been killed. You'll be too late. Let's go home. Said Big brother Li. Killed? Killed. Killed. There was a rumble in his head as if something had shattered. Big brother Li dragged him home, returning to Crouching Ox Village unconsciously. The hard-working villagers had already woken up, all greeting him. Every single face was extremely familiar. Big brother Li also replied with a smile. He passed by a brick house. It was pitch black inside, and a statue of a god was enshrined on the altar. An old woman in brightly colored clothes was currently worshipping the statue. She was the witch of the village. All weddings, funerals, and sacrifices had to be done by her. She even knew divination and exorcism. She was extremely effective, possessing great prestige in the surrounding villages. Hearing the disturbance, she turned around and smiled benevolently. The voice in his head rang out again. He suddenly broke free from Big brother Li and rushed into the witch's house. He made his way around the altar and arrived at the back of the house. There was a verdant vegetable field here. He began digging desperately towards a location that seemed to be engraved in his soul. He felt like all the blood in his body was boiling. His hands dug through the moist soil. He was completely unaware of the rubble that had cut his fingers. Big brother Li's cry and the witch's question seemed to come from extremely far away. In that moment, he felt like he was extremely close to reality. Chapter 828. The white sphere was buried in the black soil. It seemed like a human skull, but it was also. A human skull was much smaller. He dug his hands into the soil with trembling hands and dug it out. His body immediately stiffened. His boiling blood seemed to plummet. It was just a white rock. Little Heir, what's wrong? Don't scare me. Big brother Li said miserably. He grabbed the witch's hand again. Has my younger brother been possessed? Save him. Little heir, is there something in my vegetable field? The witch told Big Brother Lee to calm down first before rubbing his head and asking kindly. It was extremely familiar, yet also unfamiliar. I don't know. He grasped the white stone tightly, stood up dejectedly, his body swaying a little. Exhaustion, hunger, pain, in a split second, surged up like a tide, but it was not as deep and heavy as the disappointment in his heart, but he did not know what he was disappointed about. Hadn't he been like this for the past decade or so? What was he yearning for? He made his way out of the witch's house and covered his eyes with his hand. Sunlight shone resplendently between his fingers. The sun rose as usual, radiating with warm light. The mist that enveloped the small village gradually dispersed, and smoke rose up from the chimneys of the houses. This was an extremely ordinary morning that he had repeated thousands of times in his life. From today onwards, he would spend every day and night like this, but he experienced a nightmarish fear. He returned home in low spirits and sat down at the table. He ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He gripped the rock that resembled a child's skull the entire time. The sun set again, but tomorrow would rise again. Crouching Ox Village was far too small, and life was far too ordinary. Everything spread like the wind. Very soon, everyone found out that Li Erlang had gone mad. They all came to visit him, but they all sighed when they saw him, saying that he was just too deeply attached to the old ox. He was unable to endure the blow, which was why he had gone crazy. The moon hung high in the sky. He finally stood up from the table and made his way out, arriving beside an ancient well in the village. He sat down on the moss-covered rock and gazed into the well. The water in the well quietly reflected the bright moon and the thin face of a young man, which was filled with confusion. Just what is wrong with me? Is it just because of a dream like that? However, even though the dream had dissipated like smoke, the feeling in the dream still lingered. It was an intense passion, a struggle, a wild laugh, a indulgence, a true love, and a death feud. His expression was twisted, and his scarred hands gripped the white stone tightly. Erlang, you, don't move. We can talk about it. A dead cow can't come back to life. Brother Li's voice was trembling. He was afraid that Erlang was going to jump into the well, so he tried to persuade him. Little brat, you've really gone mad. Your parents died early. I raised you up with all my effort, and this is how you treat me. Sister-in-law Li roared. As she spoke, she began to sob. You're not going to live like this anymore. Mrs. Li roared. The sound of dogs barking could be heard throughout the village. Every household lit up their lights and the villagers woke up from their sleep. In just a short while, they were all gathered around the well. Adults and children, men and women, were all trying to persuade him not to take things too hard. His gaze swept past the crowd, past the crouching ox hill, past the endless mountains. The two words, Qingshan, suddenly leapt into his head. Like a flash of inspiration, he lowered his head and murmured, Qingshan. Brother, where's the money from selling the cow? After a long time, he suddenly raised his hand and asked. You, wait here, I'll go get it right now. Brother Li rushed out of the crowd and quickly brought over the pouch filled with money and gave it to him. He looked at a few pieces of silver in the pouch, which shone silver under the moonlight. He put the stone in his hand into the pouch and suddenly stood up. The crowd quieted down, and pairs of eyes just stared at him. He looked around, chose a direction, and walked out of the village. The crowd was stunned by his expression, and didn't dare to stop him. They split into two sides and watched his figure disappear under the moonlight. Brother Li and sister-in-law Li wanted to go forward to stop him, but they suddenly stopped, and a strange expression appeared on their faces. At first, his footsteps were very heavy, and he didn't know where he was going. But gradually, his footsteps became lighter and lighter. Using the bright moonlight, he followed the path that was about to be submerged by weeds and strode forward. After walking for a whole night, he walked into the town. The sky was already bright. He stood in front of a butcher's shop. A huge cow's head, with a broken horn, was hanging on the meat rack. The cow's eyes were wide open, and had already lost their usual luster. It was a blur. Flies flew around, as if to add a few more boring footnotes to this mediocre animal's death. But he could clearly feel that the blurry eyes were staring at him with that familiar warm gaze. Suddenly, he felt his face moisten. It turned out that unknowingly, his face was already covered in tears. "Little brother, what kind of meat do you want to buy? I just killed a big cow yesterday, and there's still a lot of good meat left." The butcher's boss asked a little strangely. He pointed at the cow's head. After a while, the butcher's boss watched him leave with a strange gaze. He faced the morning light, and the sunlight gilded his tall figure with a layer of light. On his back was a huge cow's head. The cow's head was very heavy, and together with the white stone in the pouch, it weighed heavily on his body. And that dream didn't seem to be faintly discernible anymore. It became heavy and clear. Time flew by, and the stars changed. The young man became a man, and the man became an old man. He traveled through countless mountains and rivers, but the scene in his dream never appeared. However, he still refused to stop. He continued to search and search. Finally, one day, he arrived at the top of the mountain and stopped. His once tall body was already hunched over, and his clothes were tattered. Only the skull of the cow's head remained on his back. The white stone had become as smooth as bone after being rubbed, but it was even heavier than before. He turned around and gazed at the path he had come from. Just how many times had he had the chance to stop and enjoy peace and joy, instead of being like this, suffering all the hardships and having nothing left? He could not help but think that perhaps he should never have come out. Perhaps he had already gone mad several decades ago. As a result, he saw the crouching ox village again, and he saw his similarly aged self, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, enjoying his old age in peace. Did he regret it? He removed the yellowed cow's skull from his back with his old hands and slowly placed it on his face. He supported it with one hand as he took out the white stone that he had warmed with his body with the other. He stared at it for a very long time and suddenly began to laugh. His laughter became louder and louder, mixed with violent coughs. He coughed up mouthfuls of blood, dyeing his snow-white beard red. With a thump, his laughter came to a halt. He collapsed on his back and gazed at the boundless sky. He said, "Regret my ass." Chapter 829. Qing Shan, Qing Shan. An incomparably familiar voice called out anxiously, accompanied by a brisk clap. Li Qingshan slowly opened his eyes, waking up from his dream. He saw an ethereal and beautiful face. "Where am I? Who am I?" Then he immediately remembered. "I am Li Qingshan, and this is Clam Mirage." All kinds of memories flooded in. Li Qingshan's pupils contracted, and the confusion on his face turned into fury. He flipped and stood up, his right hand clenched into a fist and pushed against the ground. His left hand formed a claw and faced the dreamlike beauty dressed in colorful clothes across from him. All kinds of techniques were ready to be unleashed. Wonderful, truly wonderful. But the woman did not seem to notice. Her hands continued to clap and she did not disguise the admiration in her heart. "Clam King of Mirage Sea." Li Qingshan gritted his teeth and said, "Bastard, wonderful my ass. Come, let's have a showdown." He could not help but think back to a long, long time ago. The South Sea is truly spectacular. In the evening, Li Qingshan and Little and hurried from Savage Mountain to the shore of the South Sea. This place just happened to be a peninsula that jutted out of the land. Wind blew from behind them, and the sea was boundless with endless waves. The sun set in the west and dyed the sky red. The orange light spread from the horizon of the sea to the front along with the waves. The scenery was extremely beautiful. Little N frowned slightly and seemed to be in thought. She was not as calm as usual. What is it? What are you thinking about? Li Qingshan immediately noticed and rubbed her head, asking with a smile. Nothing. Little N shook her head lightly. What, is there something you can't tell me? You've really grown up. Let's go, the Mirage Sea isn't far. Li Qingshan listened to the Banyan Tree King's instructions and did not dare to stay for too long. He took out the sea map and glanced at it. After confirming the direction, he continued on his way. Qingshan. The Clam King of Mirage Sea might not be as simple as the Banyan Tree King said, Little N suddenly said. Is that so? Let's walk and talk. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Along the way, Little N told Li Qingshan all the legends he knew about the Mirage Sea, including the most mainstream views of the South Sea cultivation community. At this moment, a thin layer of mist suddenly appeared on the horizon. Normally, Li Qingshan wouldn't have cared at all, but when he looked over, he found that the mist was changing as if it had a life of its own, vaguely revealing a strange and dazzling scene. That was the place marked on the map, the location of the Fantasy Sea. It looks like this Clam King of Mirage Sea didn't purposefully set up a trap to bait people. Otherwise, no one would have noticed it at all, Li Qingshan thought. Little N looked at Li Qingshan, waiting for him to make a decision. I told you that the Clam King of Mirage Sea isn't that simple, but you don't have to worry too much. Fellow Taoist Tree King must have his reasons for not letting you tell me this. It's not to harm me, or else he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. There must be a reason behind it, Li Qingshan said after some thought. I'm sorry. Little N lowered her head. With her intelligence, how could she not understand this? Logically speaking, listening to the Banyan Tree King's orders would be the most beneficial, but she was unable to deceive him, so she could only apologize. The only thing you did wrong was to say that. Li Qingshan lowered his head and said seriously. Little N's innocent expression was especially lovable. Do you know your mistake now? Li Qingshan smiled. Yes. Little N nodded with a smile. Don't do it again in the future. I'll use the spirit turtle to divine again. Right now, no matter what Li Qingshan did, he was used to using the spirit turtle to divine his fate first. He had already done it once when he came here, but the future seemed to be shrouded in mist, preventing him from obtaining an accurate result. Clearly, it was the influence of the Fantasy Sea, but fortunately, there were no signs of death. No matter how mysterious the Fantasy Sea was, if it was a fatal death trap, it was impossible for there to be no warning with the miraculous abilities of the spirit turtle. That was why he dared to come here without any worries. However, when he performed the divination again, the result made him slightly stunned. Although the future was still blurry, it clearly showed danger, and there was even a hint of killing intent. He could not help but feel bewildered, just knowing a few more things has caused such an obvious change in my fate. Normally speaking, shouldn't the more I know, the more I can avoid danger? If I was tricked by a lie, it would be understandable. However, the series of legendary information regarding the Fantasy Sea is clearly closer to the truth than the beautiful future described by the Banyan Tree King. How is it? Little N asked hurriedly. Nothing changed. Li Qingshan smiled. Don't lie to me. I didn't even lie to you. Little N pouted. All right, it seems to have become a lot more dangerous. Li Qingshan said. Sigh, as expected. Little N could not help but sigh. This proved that she was indeed wrong. Compared to the bliss of ignorance, I would rather bear the danger of knowing. If you lie to me too, I will feel worse than death. Li Qingshan looked into Little N's eyes with a smile, and said very seriously. This was why Little N hesitated again and finally made this choice, even though she knew it was wrong. Mutual trust was more important than life. Do you still want to go? Of course. When have I ever been afraid of danger? It's not like I'm going to die for sure. didn't I make it through a situation where I barely survived? Besides, curmudgeon myriad poisons is a little more troublesome. Li Qingshan smiled and flew to the end of the sea, diving into the fantasy sea with little Anne. In an instant, the scenery around them changed greatly. Tall buildings rose from the ground. The concrete buildings were clearly the modern city that existed in Li Qingshan's memory. Under the hazy sky, they stood in the center of the crossroads. Complicated signal lights constantly flashed, and people and vehicles moved back and forth. No wonder the scenery everyone sees in the fantasy sea is different. So this illusion can reflect the inner world, Li Qingshan sighed. This is where you've lived? Little Anne said in surprise. She could tell that this unfamiliar city had its own set of operating rules. Only two people knew about Li Qingshan possessing innate wisdom. One was Brother Ox, and the other was little Anne. He had mentioned it to her when he was copying novels in the past. Of course, in this wondrous world of the 9 provinces, this was not some great, earth-shaking secret. How is it? Is it terrible? Li Qingshan smiled. A little, but you've thought about going back, right? Little Anne seemed to be in thought. I've definitely thought about it, but I've even made up my mind not to return to Crouching Ox Village, let alone this place. Let's go. Our destination should be there. Li Qingshan pointed into the distance. A building that did not fit in with the modern city stood there. It towered into the clouds, standing out from the crowd. This should be called the Clam. They walked along the street slowly and arrived below the building before long. An elegant plaque hung above the vermilion door. On it were the 2 words, Clam. Ha, I've guessed correctly. Li Qingshan smiled. However, a sliver of worry appeared in little Anne's eyes. Li Qingshan walked up and knocked on the door 3 times, loudly stating his intentions. He took out the card that the Banyan Tree King had written for him. The card suddenly moved and flew out of his hand. It spun and flew into the sky, burrowing into the hazy clouds. Li Qingshan looked up. The clam seemed like it was about to topple over. Before long, the vermilion door opened loudly, and a voice descended from the clouds. Since it's the Banyan Tree King's introduction, please come in. The voice was extremely pleasant, but it was neutral, making it difficult to tell whether it was male or female. Could it really be a woman? Li Qingshan thought. Although he wanted to fly up directly, he still stepped through the vermilion door. The vermilion door closed loudly again. However, the first floor of the Clam was not as antique as Li Qingshan had imagined it to be. Instead, it was a metallic room filled with sci-fi colors. A foul wind blew over, and a huge monster stood in the middle of the room. Its black body flickered with a metallic luster. Its body leaned forward with its feet on the ground, and it dragged a spiky tail behind it. It let out a deafening roar and revealed layers of sharp teeth as it lunged over. Why does this thing look so much like the alien queen? As expected of an illusory realm. Do I have to fight my way up layer by layer? Li Qingshan rubbed his chin and muttered to himself. He casually punched out, and the monster that looked like the alien queen was instantly smashed into pieces. Its body fluids landed on the walls and ground, and immediately a layer of white smoke rose, corroding deep pits. After so many years, I still remember the setting of the strong acidic blood. In the future, when I'm free, I can write another novel and strengthen the divine talisman of great creation, Li Qingshan said with great interest. Kacha. A metallic cabin door opened above his head. As expected, this is the way to play. Li Qingshan gradually realized that the various scenes in the illusory realm originated from his thoughts. If he knew nothing about the legend of the Mirage Sea and purely believed in the Banyan Tree King's words, things might have gone very smoothly. It was precisely because he had the thought that this trip was not as simple as it seemed that there was such an obstacle. This way, the Banyan Tree King's lies could be explained. In this world of the Mirage Sea, lies could also become truth. The survivors who escaped from the Mirage Sea had only managed to escape because they believed in a certain kind of lie. The mainstream view of the South Sea cultivation world might be the fatal factor. If you believed that the Clam King of Mirage Sea was using clam chi to hunt, then she really was hunting. Of course, all of this was just an assumption. It was not like looking into a mirror and seeing what was reflected. After all, the Mirage Sea was still controlled by the Clam King of Mirage Sea. She might really be hunting cultivators. Since this view had been recognized by the South Sea cultivation world for thousands of years, it might not be groundless. But now that things had developed to this point, he could only fight his way up layer by layer. Not only was Li Qingshan not afraid, but he was also very curious about what other monsters would appear. Li Qingshan flew up to the second floor. Little End was still standing there, and an idea flashed through his mind. Oh no! Chapter 831. Second floor. Fifth floor. 10th floor. As Li Qingshan climbed up, he encountered all kinds of strange enemies. They were all from his imagination, and they were getting stronger and stronger. After reaching the 13th floor, he could no longer win easily, but he did not care. He unleashed his divine abilities and power, and the more he fought, the braver he became. He enjoyed it. Little N supported him from the side with a hint of deep worry in her eyes. I hope it's not like what I think. With a loud boom, the metal monster was blasted into pieces, and the door to the upper floor opened. Little N, what floor is this? Li Qingshan panted, and the wounds on his body slowly healed. The enemies were getting stronger, and he was starting to feel tired. 99th floor. But if we calculate the height, the top floor should be above us, Little N said calmly. Is that so? I was just getting excited. Is this game called Go Up 100 Floors If You're a Man? Let's go. Li Qingshan laughed and flew up to the 100th floor of the Mirage. Long, colorful curtains hung down in the tranquil palace. Wind surged in from all directions through the open doors, and the curtains swayed in the wind. The various colors wove together, brushing past Li Qingshan's face. Then, he caught a whiff of an obscure fragrance. The incense burner spat out curling smoke, but even the wind was unable to disperse it. It coiled around the palace like mist. Li Qingshan reminded Little N to be careful and walked cautiously to the center of the palace. Little N looked at his back and frowned slightly. The mirage went deep into the dark clouds. There was no height to calculate, and this was an illusion. Li Qingshan soon saw a figure dressed in colorful clothes. Her back was facing them, and she was drinking by herself. May I ask if you are the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Li Qingshan bowed and asked probingly. I am. Please take a seat, esteemed guests. I've waited for a long time. The Clam Monarch of Mirage Sea waved her sleeve and spoke without even looking back, and she didn't seem to be displeased by Li Qingshan calling her fellow Taoist. Li Qingshan carefully circled around the Clam King of Mirage Sea. A dreamy and beautiful face appeared in front of him. He thought, it really is a woman. However, because he was in an illusion, he did not dare to confirm whether what he was seeing was real or fake, so he sat down in front of the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Little N stood next to him and observed the legendary Clam King of Mirage Sea. Before Li Qingshan could speak, the Clam King of Mirage Sea said, You said you need my help. Is it for myriad poison? She glanced at Little N half-intentionally. That's right. Only fellow Taoist can do this. Li Qingshan cupped his hands. Sure. The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and stood up. She made her way over to Li Qingshan and extended her hand towards his head. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. His entire body tensed up, and he clenched his fists tightly. He was like a ferocious tiger that was ready to strike. Little N suddenly pressed down on his shoulder. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised, but out of trust in her and the fact that the spirit turtle did not warn him, he sat still. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's hand reached into Li Qingshan's forehead extremely gently, as if she had reached into a pool of water. It created a colorful ripple, and then she pulled out a jade-like, dark green nascent soul. The nascent soul that looked like an infant had its eyes tightly shut and was in a deep sleep. It did not resist at all. Li Qingshan touched his unscathed forehead and could not help but be surprised. This was basically unbelievable. Something that even the Banyan Tree King found troublesome had been resolved so easily by her. Everyone has their own specialties. The Clam King of Mirage Sea seemed to read Li Qingshan's thoughts and said with a smile. She sat down again and raised her cup towards him from afar. Thank you, fellow. Li Qingshan was overjoyed inside. He also raised his cup, about to drink it all. Qingshan. However, Little and pressed down on his shoulder again. Earlier, she did not allow him to fight, but now, she did not allow him to drink. Li Qingshan looked at Little and in surprise. Little and bowed towards the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Thank you for your hospitality, sir. We still have matters to attend to, so it's time for us to leave. You still have to drink. The Clam King of Mirage Sea fiddled around with the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascent soul as her smile flickered. Ha, there will still be opportunities in the future, but we really do have urgent matters to attend to. Thank you, fellow. We'll be taking our leave first. Li Qingshan also sensed that something was amiss, so he stood up. At this moment, the spirit turtle actually gave off an intense warning, but before he could respond, he felt dizzy. Suddenly, he saw the incense cauldrons around him. There's poison in the smoke. But that should not be the case. Even the myriad poison ancestor's poison could not kill him, let alone some sleeping smoke. His body swayed, and he sat down again, sprawled on the mat, and slept soundly. But it's fine if you don't drink it. The Clam King of Mirage Sea tasted the alcohol slowly. Her face suddenly blurred as if it was separated by a thick layer of frosted glass. Even her voice became hazy, making it impossible to distinguish her gender or age. Only her eyes remained clear. Various colors swirled and rippled in them like a kaleidoscope, staring at Little N. What are you trying to do? Little N stood in front of Li Qingshan with his sword in hand, completely unaffected by the sleeping smoke. You really are strange. Hee, can't you guess what I'm trying to do? How can a place as dangerous as the Mirage Sea allow people to come and go freely? Even he refused to believe that it would be that simple. He was constantly on guard, so it obviously could not be that simple. It's said that I created this illusion to prey on cultivators. The Clam King of Mirage Sea licked her lips. Is it because that's what he thinks? The thing that Little and worried about the most had finally happened. The reason why the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence had been resolved so easily was because of the Banyan Tree King's month-long indoctrination, which convinced Li Qingshan that the Clam King of Mirage Sea would help him. However, learning about the true face of the Mirage Sea and the ominous outcome of the divination made him raise his guard and develop hostility. After the battle on the 100 Floors, this hostility only grew. In the real world, this thought was nothing at all. Even parents, siblings, friends, and husband and wife would often develop hostility. It would be fine as long as it did not erupt. However, this was an illusion that reflected the human heart, and the Clam King of Mirage Sea was far too powerful and strange. Haven't you heard of the saying that illusions arise from the heart? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled. He doesn't treat you as an enemy. Little N was afraid of telling Li Qingshan his guess because he was afraid he would develop even greater hostility, which would make the trip even more dangerous. Otherwise, he would be dead already, the Clam King of Mirage Sea said slowly. The cultivators who had died in the Mirage Sea had treated the Clam King of Mirage Sea as an enemy precisely because they believed in the mainstream view. The outcome of a battle against a peak third heavenly tribulation demon king in an illusion obviously went without saying. What do you want? Little End knew that fighting was useless, so he just stowed his sword away and let Li Qingshan lie down with his head on her lap. Chapter 832. The Clam King of Mirage Sea poked the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence with the tip of her finger. This enemy that Li Qingshan found troublesome was currently sleeping, as delicate as a real infant. In this world of the Mirage Sea, the Clam King was the absolute ruler. Whether it was the poisonous alcohol or the bewildering smoke, they were just mediums. What truly took effect was still the Clam King of Mirage Sea's unbelievable power. No matter how cautious Li Qingshan was, she could pull him into a dream with just a blink of an eye. I'm willing to dream this dream for him, Little N said to the Clam King of Mirage Sea as she cradled Li Qingshan's head. No matter how close you are, there are some things that cannot be replaced. Originally, I wanted to give you a dream too, but unfortunately, your heart is empty. Nothing can be reflected, let alone a nightmare. A nightmare? Little N said. Oh my, I think I've let the cat out of the bag. The Clam King of Mirage Sea stuck out her tongue and covered her mouth as she giggled. Just now, her composed, elegant, and noble image had suddenly collapsed. She was like a child who had succeeded in a prank, but her face remained a blur the entire time as if it constantly flowed and changed among the faces. Little N understood that this image of hers, even the way she spoke and did things, originated from Li Qingshan's imagination to a large extent. Only now that Li Qingshan had fallen asleep did she gradually reveal her true face. Regular people could not see this true face, as when people interacted with others, it was inevitable for them to have some preconceived notions and some illusions. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's existence itself would be distorted and affected, just like how everyone saw a different Mirage Sea. The Clam King of Mirage Sea had 1,000 faces too. Only Little and practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, being colorless and without self, without sense and without form. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's image was unable to receive the support of impressions and imagination, which was why she presented this true face that had no fixed face. They sighed in their hearts, what a strange existence. All right, the dream has been formed. Come, let us take a look. Let's have a drink. The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and pointed at Li Qingshan's head from afar. Li Qingshan's head shone brightly, and the roof above him suddenly turned into a colorless and transparent gas. Under the illumination of the light, it shone with a myriad of colors and gradually condensed into a picture hanging in the sky. Boundless yellow sand spread out. Poplar trees, ancient cities, ruins, and broken walls formed a desolate scene. Li Qingshan stood on a sand dune, this is the fantasy sea. Beside him, Little and replied, it should be an illusion. This nightmare seems to be very special. Clam King of Mirage Sea watched the scene with great interest. This is... Little and looked up. This nightmare did not seem dangerous at all. The Clam King of Mirage Sea countered with a question, do you know what is the most primitive, deepest, most enduring, and most powerful emotion in a person's heart? Love. Naturally, this was not Little N's answer. Instead, it was a young girl who jumped out of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's body. She cupped her hands and had an expression of yearning. Blazing, but not lasting. The Clam King of Mirage Sea shook her head. The young girl paled. Friendship. A forthright man with an unkempt beard jumped out of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's body. The White Emperor still holds his sword when he knows. The Clam King of Mirage Sea waved her hand in disdain. The man was silent. Kinship. A white-haired old granny said with a benevolent expression. Loving mothers are common, but filial sons are hard to find. The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed. The old granny silently shed tears. Hatred, the twisted young man said darkly. Fabricated things. Thoughts. The wise man stroked his long beard. Nonsense. Figures jumped out one after another and gave different answers. They were all rejected by the Clam King of Mirage Sea and silently retreated. They talked to themselves, directed and acted like they were crazy. Dreams. Little N suddenly said. The Clam King of Mirage Sea paused slightly and smiled. Interesting, but it's still not right. Although everyone dreams, they are as fragile as bubbles, and they are just a beautification of desire. This complicated desire is not even worth mentioning compared to the true and only answer. Little N said nothing. It's fear. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice trembled. She spread her arms and roared at the sky. Then, she hugged her shoulders and knelt on the ground. The figures around her all showed expressions of fear and disappeared. The fear of not being able to obtain, the fear of losing, the fear of life, the fear of death. The fear of advancing bravely is because of fear, the fear of hesitating is because of fear, the fear of shouting is because of fear, the fear of silence is because of fear. All living beings have fear in their hearts. Behind every action is fear. Failure will lead to greater fear, and success will lead to new fear. Fear, fear, fear. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice gradually weakened. She curled up on the ground and sobbed softly like a frightened child. So scary. So what? Little N said. The Clam King of Mirage Sea leaped up. It was as if her performance earlier was just a dream. She pointed at the reflection in the sky and said, "This is no ordinary nightmare. It's the deepest part of his heart. It's the greatest and deepest fear that's stripped away of all those false desires and dreams." He, do you really think he can survive? Little N's expression changed. Look, even you have fear. I understand now. There's no need to pull you into a dream at all. That would be too unreal. All I need to do is let you watch the thing you fear the most happen with a clear mind. The Clam King of Mirage Sea wretchedly rubbed her hands together and spoke in a mysterious tone. What is this? The Clam King of Mirage Sea was slightly shocked and looked at the sky. At this moment, the first sandstorm in the reflection came. Oxen's whistle came from the dream and echoed throughout the entire Mirage Sea world. What kind of dream is this? Is he scared to death of this bull? The Clam King of Mirage Sea was confused. While she could create dreams, she could not decipher every detail. She hurriedly tried to maintain the dream. Very soon, Oxen disappeared into the sandstorm. Li Qingshan found the stone pillar, but he could not find any trace of Little and Hm. It looks like that bull is not afraid, but a powerful symbol. To him, an unusual miracle almost burst the dream. But isn't this fantasy a little too surreal? The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed. She felt that it was slightly strange for her to say this. After all, he had seen the most bizarre and dazzling dream illusions. Even the modern city Li Qingshan had imagined only slightly surprised him. Look, the real show is coming. Now that he's lost you, he can only move forward alone in the desert. His fear is growing deeper and deeper. The Clam King of Mirage Sea lay down comfortably and enjoyed the dream as she munched on sunflower seeds. Suddenly, she asked Little N, "Do you want some?" Little N ignored her and looked up at Li Qingshan passing through the sandstorms. The confusion on his face grew heavier and heavier. He felt a slight pain in his heart formed from magic power. This kid's fear is really unusual. Normal people would only see some terrifying monsters or enemies that have come back from the dead. It's worth mentioning that I've appeared many times. However, this kid's desire on the surface is to fight monsters and climb buildings. He's basically a battle maniac. In other words, he's not afraid of fighting me. How daring. But it's still the same. Fear is the most primitive and deepest emotion in a person's heart. There is no exception, so accept your fate. Why don't we make a bet on how he'll die? The Clam King of Mirage Sea took out another bucket of popcorn as if she was watching a novel movie with great interest. Little End drew his sword and said, "Wake him up immediately and let us go, or I'll kill you." "Kill me?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea pointed at her own nose, and her ever-changing face suddenly froze. It was the overlapping of thousands of faces, all filled with disbelief. "Do you know who I am? I'm the Mirage Sea. Hi. King. Wahahaha. Cough, 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 cough." The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice shook up the space. She let out a wild laugh before coughing violently. She choked on the popcorn. "I don't have the slightest hostility towards you," said Little Anne. The Clam King of Mirage Sea leaned on her hand and was troubled. "That really is a problem." "Yep, then I'll let you chop to your heart's content." Shaoan slashed down with her sword. The Clam King of Mirage Sea brought her palms together and caught the edge of the sword. "Your sword is a little strange. I feel like I can't let you hit me." In the Mirage Sea world, with the Clam King of Mirage Sea's strength, even if the myriad poison ancestor struck out at full strength when he was in peak condition, he would not be able to harm a single hair on the Clam King of Mirage Sea. She would already be lucky enough to escape from the Mirage Sea. However, the Buddha-slaying sword was not a regular arcane treasure. It possessed a unique power, which even made the Clam King of Mirage Sea feel a hint of danger. Little End tried to pull the Buddha-slaying sword, but it did not budge. The pale white samadhi flames of white bone lit up in his eyes, and the skull prayer beads slipped into his hand. "Give up. If you had undergone the third heavenly tribulation, I would also be fearful, but right now, you're nowhere close to being my opponent. If this continues, your empty heart will develop true hostility or even killing intent for him. By then, you'll be in danger too." "I don't want to kill you," the Clam King of Mirage Sea said sternly, like a warning, but also like a persuasion. The color in her eyes changed, unleashing the bearing of a supreme demon king. She was even more powerful than Li Qingshan imagined her to be. However, Little N ignored her. "Release him. Look, he's going to die. He's going to die. Look back. Don't miss the most fascinating part." The Clam King of Mirage Sea pointed at the reflection in the sky and called out like she was having a seizure. Little N suddenly turned around. Li Qingshan had collapsed in the white desert and was gradually buried by the white sand. At the same time, his aura became extremely weak. He was not injured at all, but he was on the verge of death. Little N lunged over and shook him hard, shouting, "Qingshan! Wake up! It's just a dream." The reflection in the dream completely faded into darkness. "It's over. It's an extremely wonderful dream, one that makes one gasp in amazement. It makes one feel that those who dream of monsters and enemies in their nightmares are basically weak cowards. This is a nightmare that is truly worth watching, but it proves to us once again that even such brave and fearless people actually have great fear hidden in their hearts, and fear can kill." The Clam King of Mirage Sea stood up and introduced the dream to the non-existent audience. She first praised, then sighed, and finally responded with a smile. Yet at this moment, the reflection in the dream lit up again, and the Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly turned around. Why isn't it over yet? Was that not his greatest fear just now?" When Li Qingshan woke up from the cowshed in the dream, the Clam King of Mirage Sea was dumbfounded. Her mouth fell open without a care for her image, and the melon seeds in her hands scattered all over the ground. Chapter 833. Qingshan. Little N saw Li Qingshan furrow his brows in his sleep, as if he was in great pain. The Clam King of Mirage Sea sat down again. She was no longer careless. Instead, she sat upright and still, gazing at the dreamy reflection in the sky. Li Qingshan paced back and forth in his dream. The scenery in his dream was nothing more than an ordinary village the entire time, but he showed a nightmarish fear. She asked little N, "Where is this?" "Crouching Ox Village, the place where he was born." Little N glanced at the Clam King of Mirage Sea. "In other words, this is 20 years ago." "It really is as I thought." "So this is his greatest fear, his greatest fear." "It's not pain and death, not forgetting everything and dying alone, but fear, that this is all a dream." The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice trembled slightly. Little N sensed her abnormality and said in thought, "Since you said that all living beings have fear in their hearts, then it's the same. What is your greatest and deepest fear, Clam King of Mirage Sea?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed and did not answer him directly. "Right now, I really do want to wake him up, but this goes against the principles of my existence, so he's dead for sure." In the past several millennia, the cultivators who accidentally entered the Mirage Sea and then sank into their nightmares might not even be able to face their greatest fear before they were killed by the monsters in their nightmares. However, through his extraordinary courage that did not fear death, he managed to last until now, entering an even deeper nightmare. However, he was forced to face his greatest fear. This was already an unsolvable knot. No one could defeat their greatest fear. No one. The greater the courage, the deeper the fear. This was the most primitive, deepest, most enduring, and most powerful emotion. It had always been the cornerstone of willpower. "I don't believe it," Little N said stubbornly. "All right, then let's wait and see." The Clam King of Mirage Sea was no longer satisfied with watching from the sidelines. Instead, she threw herself directly into Li Qingshan's dream. As she gazed at the dejected Li Qingshan, she could not help but sigh inside. She even felt a hint of anticipation. In the reflection of the dream, Li Qingshan dug out a white stone from the witch's backyard and sat there for a whole night. Then, he walked out of the room and came to the well. Is it finally over? Through the villager's eyes, the Clam King of Mirage Sea gazed at the dejected Li Qingshan by the moonlight well. She could not help but sigh. If it was an ordinary dream, committing suicide was indeed a way to escape. However, dying in this deepest nightmare was only a dead end. Even the soul would be destroyed and then be digested by the mirage. The legends of the South Sea's cultivation path were not completely false. However, Li Qingshan stood up and walked out of the village. The Clam King of Mirage Sea was stunned, and so were all the villagers. Brother Li and sister-in-law Li wanted to go up and stop him, but the Clam King of Mirage Sea stopped them. She did not want to cause any more trouble. She wanted to see just what this man wanted to do. Moreover, when this man decided to leave, how could a village man and woman stop him? When Li Qingshan stood in front of the butcher's shop in town and stared at the ox head in a daze, the Clam King of Mirage Sea looked through the butcher's eyes and saw this. "You still refuse to give up and want to confirm it? This oxen really does mean a lot to you. It's basically a pillar of support that you can't live without, but you can see now. Miracles don't exist. Dreams don't exist either. You should give up now. Go back to your Crouching Ox Village." However, Li Qingshan shouldered the ox head and made his way off into the distance. The Clam King of Mirage Sea gazed at his receding figure and revealed a strange expression. "What do you want?" "You still don't know, but all struggles are futile." As a result, she followed him, watching as he paced about in this exitless maze in search of a dream that did not exist at all. He was disappointed time and time again, but he never felt despair. He was tempted time and time again, but he never stopped. Unknowingly, she accompanied him through several decades of this dream. Finally, one day, he stopped and looked back. The shadow of death filled the air. He could clearly sense it too. After a moment of thought, he laughed aloud and uttered his final words. "Regret my ass." It was earth-shattering, leaving the Clam King of Mirage Sea stunned. She murmured to herself, he actually defeated this nightmare. No, it's not exactly a victory, nor is there a possibility of victory. He just persisted the entire time without admitting defeat, even to the very last moment of his life. What an extremely stupid method. Vaguely, she seemed to see an indomitable oxen. The ox demon's great strength sinks in the mud. Perhaps life was a meaningless persistence, but persistence itself was the greatest meaninglessness. Perhaps there was no brother ox, no little Anne, no 9 heavens in this world, but even if he had forgotten some things and lost the various divine abilities of the 9 transformations of demons and gods, there was a spirit that had been deeply engraved in a place even deeper than fear. Perhaps he would never be able to defeat fear, but this would not stop him from continuing to fight. Moo! The dream shattered. Butterflies flew through the boundless darkness, dancing with indescribable colors. They flowed with equally indescribable colors and dyed the black curtain. Following little Anne's call, Li Qingshan woke up from his dream. He slowly opened his eyes and gazed at little Anne's joyful face. The floodgates of his memories were instantly opened, and all kinds of languages, voices, and images surged out. His head felt like it was splitting, and he was extremely exhausted, but he also felt an indescribable joy. Wonderful, this is truly wonderful. The Clam King of Mirage Sea clapped hard and did not hesitate to express the admiration in her heart. As Li Qingshan woke up, her appearance stabilized once more. It was a dreamy and beautiful face. Clam King of Mirage Sea. Li Qingshan roared. He immediately understood that the nightmares he had experienced were all because of the Clam King of Mirage Sea. She was not as kind and gentle as the Banyan Tree King had described her to be. He was even more furious that she had treated his nightmares like a movie. I know you're very angry, but you can't blame me for this. Fellow little Anne, you'd better explain to him and have him control his hostility. Otherwise, I won't be able to stop myself from attacking. The Clam King of Mirage Sea spread her hands and wore an innocent expression that was asking for a beating. Qingshan. Little Anne hugged Li Qingshan tightly from behind and murmured. Little Anne. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. He could sense that her emotions were fluctuating violently. Chapter 834. A while later, little Anne explained the entire story to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan could not help but find it unbelievable. In his opinion, every single demon king was an extremely powerful and independent individual. They all had their own distinct personalities and opinions. It was far too strange for the Clam King of Mirage Sea to display different attitudes and stances based on the other party's will. He could not help but re-evaluate the Clam King of Mirage Sea before him. Just what kind of existence was she? His initial guess that she was trapped by love was basically a joke. Then why did she spend her entire life wandering the South Sea? It's all my. Little Anne was about to apologize when Li Qingshan interrupted him. What? Nothing. Little Anne lowered his head. That's more like it. It feels like many years have passed, but don't think I don't remember what I said. Li Qingshan smiled. However, this also explained why the Banyan Tree King did not tell him the truth. Once he learned the Clam King of Mirage Sea was a monster like this, it would be impossible for him not to raise his guard. It would be very difficult for him to deal with the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence smoothly. However, there were still many twists and turns in the end, and it was still not over yet, as even a blind person could sense his deep hostility, let alone the Clam King of Mirage Sea who could read minds. Who knew what kind of changes would occur, but he had never been afraid of a challenge. He said to the Clam King of Mirage Sea, in other words, I asked for all of this myself. It's not your fault at all. You can't blame the mirror if you're ugly, right? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled like a flower. Then now that everything has happened, can you let us go? Li Qingshan composed himself and controlled his battle intent. No. The Clam King of Mirage Sea said firmly. Really? Li Qingshan squinted his eyes. As it seemed, there was no way they could be amicable this time, but how was he supposed to defeat the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Don't worry, don't worry. I don't plan on bullying you anymore. The Clam King of Mirage Sea waved her hand with a smile. Bullying? Li Qingshan frowned. He had clearly been forced into dire straits, enduring unprecedented suffering, yet it was actually just bullying? It was really, really unpleasant. Although it's called bullying, it's actually very beneficial to you. Although you have a kind of courage to advance bravely, in the end, you are still too young. Without tempering your mind, your cultivation speed will become slower and slower, and it's very easy for you to fall into a bottleneck. This dream allows you to face the fear in your heart. It can be considered as making up for your shortcomings. This is rarer than any miraculous elixir. Although it was a little dangerous, you should be thanking me for the result. The Clam King of Mirage Sea tilted her head and stared into Li Qingshan's eyes with a smile. This is really hard to be moved. Perhaps I should thank your 8 generations of ancestors. Li Qingshan looked inside his body. Although he was extremely tired, he was unprecedentedly clear, like a rusted sword that had been sharpened and became sharp. In his heart, he had to admit that the benefits that this dream brought him were truly indescribable. First of all, he gained a deeper comprehension of the ox demon transformation. Although he had forcefully pushed the ox demon transformation to the 5th layer, it was like a child playing around with a huge blade. He had never been able to use it freely, only able to purely use its great destructive power. Only in the battle against the myriad poison ancestor did he comprehend the use of the gravity of the earth. Now, with his brand new vitality, he only needed to consolidate it, and he would be able to unleash even greater power than the 5th layer of the ox demon. He could not help but sigh. So the 5th layer of the ox demon can be so powerful. I'll probably have to break through to the 3rd heavenly tribulation before I can unleash my full strength. By then, are there any demon kings in the world who can contend against me? The other benefit was that the spirit turtle had become even clearer and clearer, like the dust on a mirror had been brushed away. Its senses towards the obscure changes in the heavenly secrets and fate had become sharper. And, when it was applied to abilities, it naturally had even more subtle uses. The warning signs had already vanished. There did not seem to be any danger in the Mirage Sea anymore, but Li Qingshan still dared not be careless. The Clam King of Mirage Sea really could not be predicted using common sense. Doesn't that go against the principles of your existence? Little An asked. Don't look at me like this. I have my own opinions too. I just don't use them very often. The Clam King of Mirage Sea stretched out her body and gazed at the sky. She said, I might still be a stranger to you, but I've already known you for many years in my dreams, Li Qingshan. In other words, should I call you an old friend? Li Qingshan sneered. He did not feel honored that someone was admiring his sorry state in his nightmares. Hee, that won't be necessary. However, I hope you know that I share the same fear as you, which is why I've been trapped in this Mirage Sea for several millennia. The Clam King of Mirage Sea extended her hands as if she was trying to demonstrate the length of several millennia. Didn't you create this place with clam chi? Li Qingshan asked in surprise. Aren't cocoons created by insects? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and scolded, it's all that bastard's fault. I was just joking around with him, and he tricked me like this. The more she scolded, the angrier she became. She felt that just scolding was not enough to vent her anger. Suddenly, she jumped up, and a man in dragon robes suddenly appeared in her hands. She slapped him left and right. Is it so great to be an emperor? Is it so great to be an emperor? Huh? Li Qingshan looked at little N and communicated, is there something wrong with this Clam King of Mirage Sea's head? There was nothing more terrifying than a powerful crazy woman. No one could guess what she would do down there. After a while, the Clam King of Mirage Sea tossed the man aside and lay on the ground. She exhaled. Forget it. It's still my own problem. When she saw that she had calmed down, she suddenly went crazy again. She grabbed her hair and rolled around on the ground. Why? 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 Layers of illusions appeared in all directions. They were vaguely thousands of pained faces wailing and moaning. They contained a terrifying power of destruction that made people's hearts palpitate. Clam King of Mirage Sea. Your Excellency, we want to go back. Li Qingshan took a step back. He was no longer angry at the Clam King of Mirage Sea. There was no point in fighting a crazy person. Also, this crazy person really did look a little scary. It was better to keep some distance. No. The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly turned around, and the thousands of faces roared together. The incomparably enormous pressure made Li Qingshan feel like he was looking at the Dragon King of the Sea again. He asked in return, "What else do you want?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled. The sky returned to blue, and the sun shone brightly. It was as beautiful as a dream. As a reward for your spectacular performance, I've decided to give you a gift. Ugh. I don't really want it, but all right. Li Qingshan had to admit that he was still rather curious. A streak of green light was tossed towards Li Qingshan. It was the myriad poison ancestors' slumbering soul nascence. Li Qingshan caught it carefully, and all he heard was the Clam King of Mirage Sea say, "I've already completely suppressed his will. He won't put up any resistance even if you use him to forge an artifact." Li Qingshan thought of something and suddenly thought of a bold idea. If he used the third ability of the Tiger Demon, abetting the tiger, against the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence, he wondered if he could turn him into a haunt. In the past, he would never have dared to consider something like that. The will of a great cultivator was far too powerful. If he was careless, he might even suffer a backlash. However, it was a heaven-sent opportunity right now. In the past, he had also turned a group of demon commanders into haunt, but the souls that had lost their bodies and demon cores were far too weak. They were not of much practical use at all, so he could not be bothered with them afterwards, handing them all to Little N to refine. However, soul nascence was different. It was the condensation of a great cultivator's cultivation. Even if their bodies were destroyed, it would not affect their strength too much. If he could turn it into a haunt, that would be equivalent to obtaining a great cultivator's servant, and it would be absolutely loyal and would never betray him. It would be much more useful than a blood oath scroll or something like that. Then thank you for your gift, fellow. We're about to bid farewell. Li Qingshan did say that with some sincerity. Although he had gone through unprecedented danger during this trip, it was all worth it if he could obtain something like this. Stop right there. Who said this was my gift? Do you even have a brain? You clearly brought this yourself, so why would I be so petty as to give it to you as a gift? Are you looking down on me? Li Qingshan. The Clam King of Mirage Sea grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and bellowed fiercely. Say it, say it. I'm in the wrong, all right? Li Qingshan wiped the spit off his face. For the first time in his life, he was completely unmoved by a great beauty. Although he had been scolded for no reason, he began to look forward to it. Just what kind of gift could make the mighty Clam King of Mirage Sea so serious? An arcane treasure. That was too tacky. He just felt like it should be something more precious. The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly stood on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around Li Qingshan's neck. She whispered into his ear, "This world is a dream. Warm, fragrant, and fragrant." In that instant, Li Qingshan had to admit that he was slightly moved, but before he could feel it in detail, the Clam King of Mirage Sea had already left. She stared straight at him as if asking, "How is it?" Huh? Li Qingshan was stunned. He pointed at his ear and said in disbelief, "The gift you're talking about is what you said just now. This gift is too heavy, isn't it? But I believe that you can endure it." The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed again. She could not bear to look at him anymore, afraid that he would be crushed by this gift. You're such a big idiot to believe a crazy person like me. Li Qingshan raised his head and took a deep breath so that he would not explode. He lowered his head and clasped his hands together. I'll accept this gift. Can we go now? The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly reached out and grabbed Li Qingshan's heart. With his experience from last time, Li Qingshan did not dodge at all. The tip of her finger touched his chest and produced a rainbow-colored ripple. Afterwards, she reached in and pulled out an item. Of course, what she took out was not his heart, but Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation that had been sealed for a long time. You're a disciple of the School of Novels, right? The Clam King of Mirage Sea played with the divine talisman of great creation that flowed with colorful light. What else do you have to say? If you want this thing, I'll give it to you, alright? I'm begging you, do a good deed and let us go. Li Qingshan could not stand this crazy person anymore. Although you treat me as a stranger, I will still treat you as an old friend, the Clam King of Mirage Sea pleaded. Her figure became even more illusory, just like the thousands of bubbles behind her. I will. Li Qingshan's heart moved, and he nodded seriously. The Clam King of Mirage Sea tossed the divine talisman of great creation back to him. Shen Mengdai. The moment she said these 3 words, all the bubbles burst at the same time. Every burst seemed to repeat these 3 words, deeply imprinted in his heart. She smiled slightly and burst like a bubble. From among the colors, a butterfly that Li Qingshan had once seen in his dark dreams flew out. It danced in a riot of colors, circled around Li Qingshan once, and then flew into the sky. The colors of the thousands of broken bubbles all gathered on the butterfly's body, dragging a long rainbow behind it. It broke through the largest bubble called Mirage Sea. The illusion collapsed and disappeared, boom. Scorching lightning filled the entire world, but it was still unable to drown out the beautiful rainbow. Li Qingshan and Little An flew far away. All they saw was the butterfly dancing in the lightning, as light as a dream. It seemed extremely fragile, but whenever a bolt of tribulation lightning landed on her, it would produce a riot of colors, dyeing the tribulation lightning into a rainbow. The butterfly continued to fly upward, and the entire sky was dyed by her dreamy colors, as if she was constantly asking, "Am I real? Am I real?" Across the 9 provinces, many figures stopped what they were doing and gazed in the direction of the South Sea. Their expressions varied, either envy, contemplation, or vigilance. The Banyan Tree King pondered, he's actually ascended. Has he finally resolved the mystery Kid Sea left behind for him? Fortunately, Qingshan and the others are fine. I originally thought it was my fate, but I never thought it would help him, or should I say, her first. The King of Southern Yu pondered in thought. The Clam King of Mirage Sea was one of the strongest among the 72 demon kings in the past. She was trapped in the South Sea by the Xia Emperor's scheme, unable to ascend even after all this time. Now that she's finally undergoing the tribulation, it won't affect the overall situation much. The Master of the Sword Pavilion sighed. The 4th heavenly tribulation truly is powerful. Even from so far away, it can shake up my mind. I wonder when I'll be able to take that step. Quite a while later, when the final rumble of thunder faded away, the silver moon hung over the sea quietly. The rainbow sky remained in Li Qingshan's heart, gazing at it for a very long time. Who knew whether it was because of the might of the world or because of her? Perhaps it was both. She succeeded, Little An said calmly. Just when Li Qingshan was about to say something, a familiar voice rang out from beside him, she flew so high. Suddenly, he looked over, only to see the Clam King of Mirage Sea, Shen Mengdai, covering her eyes with her hand as she gazed into the distant horizon. She acted like it had nothing to do with her. Even Little An, who had always remained unfazed, was taken aback. Li Qingshan glanced at the sky before lowering his head to look at her. He said in surprise, "Aren't you? How stupid." The one who ascended was clearly a butterfly. "I'm called the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Do you think the clam and the butterfly are the same thing?" Shen Mengdai said with a disdainful expression. "Why didn't you? We're living in a dream. Who knows what will happen after ascension? Although there are 6 paths of reincarnation, it might be a huge lie. What if that dreamer doesn't dream of the world outside the 9 provinces, and that place is just a dreamless void? Wouldn't I be dead for sure? How can I take such a risk?" Shen Mengdai explained seriously. Suddenly, she frowned. "No, you can't say that. It's too disrespectful." She knelt down toward the sky and chanted piously, "O great master of dreams, I am your loyal servant. Please forgive my rudeness. You useless idiot, kill me if you have the guts." After saying this, she looked around cautiously. However, the sea breeze was calm, and the moonlight was gentle. Nothing happened. Her lips curled into a smug smile. That smile gradually widened into hysterical laughter. She leaped up, waved her arms, and jumped and ran on the surface of the sea. "Ha ha ha ha! I'm the smartest. I'm the strongest. You're all idiots." Li Qingshan finally confirmed one thing. She really had gone mad. However, he was unsure whether what he saw right now was just an illusion she had left behind, or whether the butterfly that had flown away had always been a dream of hers. Regardless, she had indeed undergone the 4th heavenly tribulation, and she was no longer bound by the Mirage Sea. Just the thought of a super madwoman like her was terrifying. After going mad, Shen Mengdai arrived before Li Qingshan again. She walked over the waves, elegant and serene, as beautiful as a dream. It was impossible to imagine what she looked like when she went mad. She said, "I'm leaving." "Where?" Li Qingshan asked instinctively, but he regretted it as soon as he asked it. What did that have to do with him? "The Dragon Province. I still have a debt to settle." Shen Mengdai revealed a chilling, sunken smile. Afterwards, before Li Qingshan could say anything, she burst like a bubble and vanished. All that remained was her final words, echoing through the sea, under the moon, and in his heart. Chapter 836. The wind blew quietly, and the cloudless night sky was illuminated by the extraordinarily large silver moon. The distant stars formed a resplendent river of stars. Li Qingshan held the divine talisman of great creation and remained silent for a very long time. Everything he had experienced in the Mirage Sea was like a dream. He muttered to himself, "Shen Mengdai." Suddenly, he smiled. Probably no one could imagine just what kind of upheaval this crazy woman, who had been trapped in the South Sea for several thousand years, would bring to the world after undergoing the 4th heavenly tribulation. From now on, the Dragon Province would be filled with trouble. Of course, even now, he was still extremely doubtful of what she had said. He felt like she had lost herself too deeply in the illusions, which was why she had become so crazy. She was like the authors who had been scared to death by their own horror novels in the news from his past life. However, it was exactly because of such strange existences that the 9 provinces were so interesting, making people yearn for them. All right. I look forward to our reunion in the Dragon Province. However, when the time comes, I'll bully you viciously. He stowed the divine talisman of great creation away and smiled. He was very vengeful. With that, he looked around. The surroundings were calm, so he could not help but smile bitterly. This crazy woman had almost made him lose his mind. He just felt like she could appear at any time. "Qingshan, look. What's that?" Little and suddenly pointed to the south. Li Qingshan followed her finger and saw a protruding semicircle on the horizon. It should be an island. That seemed to be the only explanation given how far away it was. But it wasn't there earlier. Before Little and could finish, Li Qingshan noticed something strange as well. The island was clearly rapidly enlarging, approaching them at an unbelievable speed. The calm sea suddenly began to surge. Li Qingshan called out to little N, and they immediately flew north. It definitely would not be easy to deal with something like that. Fortunately, although they had experienced great danger in the Mirage Sea, they were basically uninjured. They were currently flying at full speed, so they moved extremely quickly. However, when Li Qingshan looked back, he was shocked to find that the island was approaching at a speed that was clearly faster and larger. Just as Li Qingshan was wondering what kind of calamity he was about to get himself into, the island stopped at the place where the Sea King of Mirage Sea was undergoing its tribulation. So the target wasn't us, but that crazy woman. Li Qingshan heaved a sigh of relief. He flew for another distance and concealed his aura. Then, he executed the mystic light illuminates all, and zoomed in on the scene hundreds of kilometers away. So big. Li Qingshan let out a cry of surprise. That island was actually a giant whale that was tens of thousands of meters long. A light wave of its tail would stir up a tsunami, and a jet of water would shoot up into the sky, as if it wanted to wash away the bright moon in the sky. In the face of this inconceivably huge strange creature, he could not help but sigh as if he had seen a god. It's the Great Whale King, one of the 72 demon monarchs. According to the records, he swims in the deep sea and never comes to the coastal waters. Very few people have seen him. Legend has it that his whale song is very beneficial to the soul. I think it's similar to the chant of Devanaga performed by a monk king at the peak of the third heavenly tribulation, but it's definitely hard to hear. Little and introduced calmly. Just like the Clam King of Mirage Sea, this was a colossus of the South Sea. However, one swam in the deep sea, while the other was trapped in the Mirage Sea. As smart as she was, she did not expect we'll cross paths with them. All of a sudden, the deep and boundless whale song, together with the surging of the sea, flew over hundreds of miles of the sea and entered Li Qingshan's ears. He had heard countless songs before, including popular music and beautiful classical music. However, there was not a single sound that could compare to this boundless whale song. It was like the soul of the sea was singing, and even his mind trembled. The whale song came in waves, each higher than the last. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and listened, feeling the vastness of the sea. His tired mind gradually calmed down. Everything he had experienced in the Mirage Sea was like passing clouds. In the end, all that was left was this solemn and ethereal whale song that reverberated in his mind. After an unknown period of time, the whale song stopped. The Great Whale King seemed to glance at Li Qingshan through the profound light illuminates all. Its dark eyes seemed to freeze the entire deep sea, deep and serene. Then, it did not linger any longer, turning back and swimming towards the depths of the sea. An irrepressible desire suddenly rose in Li Qingshan's heart. He wanted to cast everything aside and follow him into the depths of the endless sea. He wanted to float along with the waves, roam the sea, and not have to fight or worry anymore. However, he returned to his senses very soon. Now was not the time. He still had a heavy responsibility. He had to continue forward until he reached the heavens and stood beside that figure. As a result, he watched the huge whale gradually shrink, finally disappearing from the surface of the sea. She's probably here to see Shen Meng die off. However, she doesn't know that crazy woman has already gone to the Dragon Province. Li Qingshan could hear the farewell in the whale song. There was even a hint of joy, for she had finally broken out of the Mirage Sea and emerged as a butterfly. She has always doubted her own existence. She wants me to remember her as proof, but she doesn't know that someone has always remembered her. Afterwards, Li Qingshan discovered that he had unknowingly mastered the arts of the boundless ocean. This cultivation method that he had once placed great importance on had been eliminated before he could even reach the 9th layer. Even if he comprehended it now, it did not seem to be of much use anymore. However, so what? What mattered was that he would never forget the whale's song under the moon. He would let it resound in his heart until the day when he was relieved of the heavy responsibility on his body and would listen to its call. Until then, he would carry on fighting with fear and dreams. Under the glow of the setting sun, Li Qingshan and Little N saw the coastline. Afterwards, they continued towards Savage Mountain. Qingshan, Little N suddenly called out. Yes, what is it? Li Qingshan turned around and looked at her with a smile. In your dreams, did you want to kiss me? Little N stared straight at him with her clear eyes, as if she could see the bottom of his heart. It's not like I haven't kissed you before. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat as he said unconcernedly. Not your face, your mouth. Little N was extremely skilled at observing his expressions. Even the slightest expression could not escape her eyes. In order to emphasize it, she even purposefully pointed at his lips. Don't talk nonsense. I didn't. Li Qingshan's eyes widened like a bull's. You're blushing, Little N said. She added in her heart, and it's very red. That's because of the light, Li Qingshan refuted. But the side without the light is also red. Alright, let's not talk about these useless things. We have to hurry back. Li Qingshan sped up and flew away. He had always been known for his bravery, but now, his back seemed to be in a rather sorry state. He heard Little N's bell-like laughter behind him. Chapter 837. Savage Mountain, the 8-Point Hall. Little N stood guard outside the hall quietly. Not only could he guarantee that he would not disturb Li Qingshan, but he could also assist him at any time. In the simple, barbaric hall, Li Qingshan's scarlet eyes widened, staring at the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence. Malice rose up from his body, giving off a presence that could subdue everything. His eyes had even become as red as blood, shining with 2 demonic streaks of light. The slumbering soul nascence suddenly stirred, filled with pain and reluctance. Although its consciousness had been suppressed by Shen Mengdai, sinking into an unawakened dream, it still resisted instinctively. It was so proud that it refused to submit. Li Qingshan's expression became sterner and sterner. He raised his eyebrows and let out a deep roar, which echoed through the hall. The figure of the tiger demon vaguely appeared behind him, baring its fangs viciously. Little N was rather worried. A soul nascence was different from a soul. It possessed most of a great cultivator's power, and its cultivation was even higher than Li Qingshan's. Although he had the Clam King of Mirage Sea's assistance, this was still very dangerous. Turning it into a haunt definitely would not be that easy. However, high risk also meant high reward. Once he succeeded, he would be able to claim the Myriad Poison Cult's foundation. That was a blessed land, even better than Savage Mountain. Coupled with the protective formation, it was priceless. The Myriad Poison Cult's resources would be a huge chunk too. It was impossible for the Myriad Poison ancestor to carry all of them on him, or once he entered secluded cultivation, the Myriad Poison Cult would not be able to operate anymore. He would definitely set up a treasury in the cult. And, there would be a large medicinal garden with who knew how many precious spiritual herbs. As long as he obtained the Myriad Poison ancestor's loyalty, he could devour all of the heritage of a large sect that had existed for several millennia. Apart from these external benefits, the Myriad Poison ancestor himself was the most important. A great cultivator could increase their strength drastically, which would make their plans in the south even smoother. At crucial moments, he could even order him to self-destruct, and even the fire-devouring king would be doomed. And, great cultivators were usually skilled in alchemy and artifact forging, so the Myriad Poison ancestor could even refine poison and goo on top of that. All of these benefits combined made Li Qingshan choose to gamble. When the tiger's roar reached the valley, the 10 cave masters were summoned back. They pricked up their ears to listen, secretly guessing what he was doing. The Myriad Poison ancestor really is difficult to deal with. It's very likely for him to awaken in such an intense confrontation. If that happens, it'll be troublesome. Li Qingshan frowned. He was in his own territory, and it was unlikely for the myriad poison ancestor to barge into his sea of consciousness again if he made various preparations. However, once the myriad poison ancestor blew up his soul nascence, he would probably be heavily injured, and it was even possible for Savage Mountain to collapse, which would severely damage his foundation in the south. However, there was no turning back. He used his full strength, and the strange light invaded the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascent strand by strand with great difficulty. As time passed, the nascent soul struggled more and more violently. Just as it was about to succeed, the nascent soul suddenly opened its eyes and looked at Li Qingshan with incomparable hatred. Their eyes met. Li Qingshan thought to himself, not good. The thing he was most worried about had happened. The nascent soul's eyes suddenly became misty. The key to doing evil for the sake of the tiger was the pair of tiger eyes. Even though the slumbering enemy put up less of a resistance, they were unable to make eye contact. In this dangerous moment, it instead pushed the power of the innate ability to the limit. The surroundings twisted and changed, going from the pitch-black belly of the mountain to a gloomy forest. Miasma gathered in the air, such that even the scenery slightly further away became blurry. Why did I fall under a tree? No, I have to hurry back. It's far too dangerous here, a shaman young man said in a panic. A young shaman said in a panic. Although his face was smeared with paint, he seemed to resemble the myriad poison ancestor when he was young. When he tried to find a large tree to climb up, the wind began to rise in the forest. Why is there wind here? The young man gazed in the direction of the wind. The thick miasma that had not dispersed for millennia suddenly surged and dispersed, like subjects welcoming the arrival of their king. Two specks of scarlet light vaguely appeared. A wool. There was a vicious tiger's roar, and the entire forest shook. The fierce wind became even more violent, completely dispersing the miasma and revealing a vicious tiger. Its fur was scarlet like fire, shining with glossy light in the darkness. It was covered in bright, black patterns, and the character for king was written on its forehead. The tiger saw the young man and walked over slowly. The young man wanted to flee, but he became feeble from fright. The tiger pounced at him gently and pressed him under its front paw, lowering its head and staring at him. A foul smell assaulted his face. The young man looked back in fright. The scarlet eyes were forever engraved in his soul. Li Qingshan jerked awake and looked at his hands. They had not turned into tiger claws. What was that all about earlier? Was I dreaming again? He dreamed that he had turned into a vicious tiger, roaming through the dense forests of the Mist Province before hunting. Li Qingshan discovered that the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul had already been dyed by the strange light. It stared at Li Qingshan with its eyes wide open, but there was no resentment or hatred anymore. There was only obedience from the bottom of its heart. Was that the myriad poison ancestor's dream earlier? Looks like it was a terrifying nightmare too. He was alarmed by me and woke up from the dream, but then he was affected by the tiger demon's innate ability and pulled back into the dream. My consciousness entered his sea of consciousness with it. Li Qingshan guessed. In the end, he could not help but sigh, it's all because of that crazy woman in the end. He had personally witnessed the Clam King of Mirage Sea's power. Clearly, it was not that easy to break free from her nightmare, and the tiger demon's innate abilities still seemed to have abilities that he had yet to uncover. He subconsciously rubbed his eyes. Apart from turning his soul into a haunt, would it be effective in deterring the enemy if he used it in regular battles? There was no need for the enemy to directly submit to him. All he needed to do was deter them. Even if it was for a split second, it could be the difference between life and death. This nightmare sure has brought me quite a lot of benefits. At this moment, the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul suddenly let out a baby-like cry and flew high into the air. It shone with rings of green light, illuminating the entire hall. Li Qingshan gazed over. The myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul rapidly grew up, actually turning back into the myriad poison ancestor in the end. When the green light dispersed, it landed before Li Qingshan again and directly knelt down. It was filled with shame and regret. "Great King, please forgive this old man for his great disrespect." Seeing how his mortal enemy had become like this, Li Qingshan could not help but be taken aback. The corner of his lips curled into a smile, but he refused to believe it completely, afraid that it was a trap. As a result, he straightened himself out and coughed gently. "Old bastard, do you know your crimes?" I do. The myriad poison ancestor bowed his head repeatedly. "What crimes? Tell me." Some of the doubt in Li Qingshan's eyes vanished. Great cultivators had their own pride. It was basically impossible for them to do something like that. "First, I shouldn't have launched a sneak attack on Savage Mountain while the Great King was away, much less resent the Great King over the deaths of my disciples. Afterwards, the Great King wanted to kill me, so I should have stood still and allowed the Great King to kill me. Then I tried to flee, which added to my crimes. I can't even bear it even if I die. I only hope the Great King can allow me to make up for my crimes with merit. With how wise and valiant the Great King is, you'll definitely unite the 9 provinces in the future. I'm willing to follow your lead." The myriad poison ancestor said a great deal of flattery again. Clearly, the myriad poison cult possessed a legacy like that, which even made Li Qingshan feel embarrassed. He barked, "Shut up." "Yes." The myriad poison ancestor immediately shut up. He was extremely obedient. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud. He had finally come to an end with this battle, and he had benefited greatly from it. His laughter echoed through the surroundings before gradually dying down, turning into a long sigh again. Seeing a powerful opponent who had fought him to the death reduced to such a state was an extremely delightful matter, but it also made him feel rather sorrowful. The path of cultivation was so cruel. Once he failed, he might end up begging for death. There was no point in taking revenge anymore. After confirming that the myriad poison ancestor had already submitted to the tiger demon's ability, he said, "You can rise." Li Qingshan then asked about the myriad poison ancestor's current state. The myriad poison ancestor truly was a knowledgeable great cultivator after all, immediately giving him an explanation. Throughout history, a few great cultivators would become ghost cultivators after their bodies were destroyed, unable to find a suitable body with their soul nascence. As a result, they would become ghost cultivators, and their strength would be equivalent to ghost kings. Of course, ghosts were not immortal. In particular, ghost cultivators in the world of the living might even have a shorter lifespan than when they were humans. Once their time was up, their souls would disperse if they did not return to the 6 paths of Sasra. "Then how much lifespan do you have left?" Li Qingshan asked in a hurry. He had managed to recruit the strongest lackey after so much difficulty, so he had better not kick the bucket in just a few years. "I've already cultivated for 957 years. Originally, I only had a few centuries left in my lifespan, but now that I've become a ghost cultivator, that might not necessarily be the case. If I continue doing things like before, my lifespan will decrease by over 100 years. If I cultivate in a land of extreme Yin, my lifespan will increase by quite a lot, and if I have a method for ghost cultivators, my lifespan will increase even further. If I stay in the hungry ghost realm, I might even be able to live for another few thousand or even 10,000 years. A few centuries is enough." Li Qingshan waved his hand and took out the Sumeru ring he had stolen from the myriad poison ancestor with a flip of his hand. With a gentle flick of his thumb, it landed in the myriad poison ancestor's hand. Although Ru Xian had searched through it, she had mainly taken away the medicinal ingredients for the scripture on poison. She had not touched anything else, including the arcane treasure, the Jade Throne. If he returned it to the myriad poison ancestor now, his strength would not suffer too much. The myriad poison ancestor bowed in thanks and put the Sumeru ring back on his finger. With that, how much of your strength will you be able to recover? Li Qingshan asked. 60%. Only 60%? Li Qingshan was surprised. This was slightly more than he had imagined. Suddenly becoming a ghost cultivator requires some time to adapt. By then, it should be 70%. The cult treasure was destroyed, or I could increase it by another 10%. If I have a good method for ghost cultivators, I might be able to recover to 80% or even 90%. The myriad poison ancestor stood with his hands by his sides and said politely, like a loyal, old butler. A method for ghost cultivators. Li Qingshan sank into his thoughts. He only knew that the Umbraline sect should possess powerful methods for ghost cultivators, but he was a disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga right now. Coupled with the fact that he was an elder of the Sword Collection Palace, he was basically an enemy of the Umbraline sect. I just happen to know a decent method for ghost cultivators. It can recover his strength to 100%, or even higher. Little End walked in from outside. Chapter 838. Little Anne, as well as the daughter of Chu Lai King and the Dark Queen, had high hopes placed on her since she was young. She cultivated diligently. The Umbraline sect had many cultivation methods and secret manuals that regular disciples could not come into contact with, but she could read them freely. The Umbraline sect possessed a scripture of the Ghost King, a secret that only the path of ghost cultivators would pass on. It was similar to the Diamond Sutra of the Chan monastery of Devanaga. Once the Diamond Sutra reached the third heavenly tribulation, it could turn into various Vajras according to the different paths, such as the Fearless Guardian King, the Unraging Guardian King, the Raging Guardian King, the Unmovable Guardian King, and so on. However, with the scripture of the Ghost King, after undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, it could become the Malevolent-Eyed Ghost King, the Blood-Devouring Ghost King, the Blight-Devouring Ghost King, the Soaring Ghost King, the Thousand-Eyed Ghost King, and so on. It was even more numerous than the former. No matter which path of cultivation a cultivator had taken when they were still alive, they could all find a corresponding path after becoming a ghost cultivator. Little Eve originally read through this cultivation method casually, but with how clever she was, she obviously had a photographic memory. She said to the myriad poison ancestor, "I'll pass this scripture of the Ghost King to you. With your cultivation, you can convert to the path of ghost cultivators very quickly and become a poison-assimilating Ghost King. Your methods with poison might even be better than before." "Thank you, sir." The myriad poison ancestor beamed. Although he had been subdued by Li Qingshan and turned into a haunt, he had not lost his intelligence. He still felt joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. "It won't make things difficult for you, right?" Li Qingshan asked Little Anne. To a large sect, a cultivation method like this was definitely a secret that they would not pass on. "Compared to where we're going, this is just an insignificant detail," said Little Anne. "Fair enough." Li Qingshan smiled. Looking down from above, what was the Umbraline sect, or even the 9 provinces, worth? There were many things that were not taboo at all. If he could do it, he would do it. Li Qingshan's expression suddenly changed. He said to Little Anne, "The Tree King is calling me. Pass on the cultivation method to this old man." Then he said to the myriad poison ancestor, "From today onwards, see her like you see me." The myriad poison ancestor accepted the order politely. Li Qingshan arrived outside the belly of the mountain. The 10 cave masters bowed together and said loudly, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Li Qingshan swept his gaze across the surroundings. Although he did not deliberately reveal his aura, every single cave master felt a sense of pressure. He couldn't help but lower his head. Li Qingshan was considering when he should use them to test out the new ability derived from Accomplice to the Tiger. It would be great if he could intimidate a living person. It would be equivalent to a blood oath scroll that could be used infinitely, and it would not be that troublesome. The myriad poison ancestor has already yielded to me, choosing to join us. From today onwards, I have no more opponents in the south apart from Fire Melt Mountain. The 10 cave masters were stunned at the same time. If the myriad poison ancestor being slain by Li Qingshan was already the most unbelievable matter, then this news would be even more shocking. After Li Qingshan had basically destroyed the myriad poison cult, the myriad poison ancestor had actually yielded to him. That was basically a fantasy. Your Majesty, please forgive Wufeng's rudeness. The myriad poison ancestor is full of tricks, so you have to be careful. Don't let him feign surrender, said Yu Wufeng. There was no blood oath scroll in the world that could restrain a great cultivator. The other cave masters said nothing, but they all felt like this was the final possibility. However, out of consideration for Li Qingshan's pride, they could not bring themselves to say anything. Since Yu Wufeng had started, they all chimed in. At the same time, they carefully observed Li Qingshan's expression. If the myriad poison ancestor suddenly rebelled, they would all lose their lives. If it were not for the ability of the tiger demon, accomplice to the tiger, Li Qingshan would have never believed in the myriad poison ancestor's loyalty. He did not explain too much right now either. You don't have to worry. I have my plans for this. Anyway, the myriad poison cult has fallen. Fire Melt Mountain will be next. Yes, Your Majesty. The cave masters dared not say anything else. Only the strong were worthy of respect. Yu Wufeng had no idea whether he should be happy for his sect in the distant South Sea or not. Their mortal enemy of several thousand years had actually been defeated just like that. However, the savage mountain that had risen up like a comet would probably be even more brutal. Li Qingshan arrived under the great banyan tree and sat down in a hidden tree hole. He told the banyan tree king everything that had happened in the Mirage Sea. However, he brushed over the many details of the nightmare in a vague manner. It was not that he did not trust the banyan tree king, but that was his deepest secret. After listening to Li Qingshan's story, the banyan tree king fell silent as if he was thinking about something. For a moment, there was only the rustling of the canopy in the wind. Quite a while later, Just Now sighed in amazement. Originally, I was worried that you would encounter danger in the Mirage Sea, but I didn't think it would be a blessing in disguise. Looks like I've wasted my efforts. I will never forget Senior's care and concern, said Li Qingshan. Even though there were many deceptions, the banyan tree king was doing it for his own good. No, this is your fortune, and it's what you deserve. That oxen, no, that Senior has a discerning eye. I believe that one day, you'll be able to reunite with him. In their many years of association, the banyan tree king had vaguely guessed the existence of oxen. However, he had always doubted Li Qingshan's ambitions. Only at his level did he understand just how distant that place was. However, after hearing about Li Qingshan's experiences in his dream, he felt that perhaps he really could reach that step. His persistence was not the kind of stubbornly stubborn persistence. Instead, it often gave people a feeling that it did not matter. It was as if even if he could not reach beyond the heavens, it was not a big deal. However, as long as he was still alive, he would continue. Even if he failed in the end, he could still smile calmly and say that he had no regrets. I hope so. Li Qingshan shrugged. But I'm very curious. Has the Clam King of Mirage Sea ascended? If she survived the fourth heavenly tribulation and did not ascend, wouldn't she be invincible? Didn't she already tell you? Shen Meng Dai. What flew away was naturally her dream, said the banyan tree king with a smile. In other words, her true body is still in this world. Li Qingshan was surprised. For her, perhaps dreams are the real thing, said the banyan tree king. All right then. I'm just afraid that I won't be able to defeat her. Li Qingshan's resentment was very deep. You don't have to worry about that. The world of the 9 provinces has its own laws. Let alone an ascender, even visitors from a higher world will be restricted by these laws, or even suppressed by the entire world. Only those who have reached that senior's level can completely ignore them, said the Banyan Tree King. Though, her power is far too wondrous. Even if she's only at the peak of the third heavenly tribulation, she can still turn the dragon province upside down. Hopefully, that fellow fox can suppress her. The Banyan Tree King seemed to have a deep understanding of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's madness. He expressed his worry for the future. Once she began messing around, the situation would probably deteriorate to a point where even his intelligence could no longer predict it. After a deep conversation with Li Qingshan, he said, "Since you've subdued the myriad poison ancestor, you can get him to talk to Ru Xian. After all, there are some things that everyone specializes in. I'm not omniscient." Really? What's she doing exactly? She's acting so mysterious. Sigh, you better wait for her to tell you herself. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.